Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of the Pittsburgh Steelers Show on the SteelerFury.com podcast. I'm your host, Wil Masisak, also known as Bradshaw to Ben, sometimes as Accidental Zen on Twitter. And I'm just here to tell you this is episode 5 of our week-long series. Every night this week we've had a show on the Steelers draft and on the NFL draft in general. We started with talking about Steelers needs in their offseason in the first episode. In the second episode, we talked about the top of the draft, who's overrated, who's underrated, this kind of thing. The third episode, we dug deeply into the sleepers and small schoolers and way off the radar prospects that we like. And then last night, we did a rebroadcast of our interview with Gannon quarterback Korey Karbowsky, who is one of our favorites here at the show. Tonight, the pièce de résistance, our annual Steelers mock draft war room, where we will go through and bandy about prospects for each pick of the Steelers draft this year, and we will make a selection somehow, reaching a consensus, I'm sure, through the means of possibly some Zen or some battery. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to decide. Rochambeau, but we will get it done, and hope you enjoyed. It's going to be a ride, so buckle up for this episode. I turn it over to our host and star of the show, Jeremy Kohlman.
Hello and welcome back, Steeler fans. Welcome back to the SteelerFury.com pre-draft extravaganza, as we like to call it here. Extravaganza.
Yeah,
I like that. I like those sound effects there, Will.
Yeah.
But welcome back. The Steelers have 7 picks currently. 1 in round 1, 1 in round 2, 2 in round 2, with pick 32 and 49, rounding it out with pick 80 in round 3, pick 120 in round 4, and then we've got some very late draft picks. Curious or
a really, really long wait.
Yeah, the long sleep. Before we pick again at the back end of the 7th round, courtesy of that trade with the St. Louis Rams, gifting us Allen Robinson for half price. So thank you, Rams. Solved a little bit of an issue there. So with that being said, let's kind of jump right in.
Just quickly before we get started, I just want to say that we haven't had a chance to talk about it this week, but I got some excellent NFL rumors that are sort of related to the draft that we haven't talked about on any of the other shows, partly because I ran into some of them after the show where we talked about NFL rumors and narratives. But just quickly, I heard, so my sources were from 3 different NFL teams. So they're people that someone connected with teams. And the first thing that I thought was really interesting was that the Lamar Jackson situation, there was some speculation that when they signed Odell Beckham, that this was a way to placate Lamar Jackson. It was like please come back to us. Like I said, I think on the show, it's like Kobe Bryant buying a diamond ring, for his wife to come back. And apparently that's not the case. The quote that I heard was that the Ravens and Lamar Jackson, he's more out than at any point during this process, meaning he's even less likely to be coming back. So I think that's a story that may very well play out during the draft next week, but don't be surprised if the Ravens make a change at quarterback and do something with Lamar Jackson that doesn't involve re-signing him and having him come back to the team. So maybe they'll come down off that 2 first-round picks and agree to like a first-round pick and a player, but it looks like Lamar Jackson is at least for the moment on the outs. The other thing I heard was that multiple teams have Jonathan Mingo, the wide receiver from Mississippi, as a first-round pick. So do not be surprised if he goes in the first round. And it's like, if you think about it, the analytics teams will be really against the idea because he wasn't like that guy that was their dominator with all the stats. His counterpart, he's always had somebody around that caught a lot of passes as well. But he's a very the stuff that doesn't necessarily show up on the stat sheet. He's a great blocker, very willing blocker, very physical player, and one that probably has an NFL, body and skill set to start. So he may have some early success. Anyway, those are 2 things And then the last one this was a bit of a surprise to me. I mean, I like the player, and I probably thought I had him higher than most, but that Matthew Bergeron, maybe tackle 1 or 2 for several teams in the NFL. He's another one to not be surprised if he goes earlier than you think he's going to go. He's the tackle from Syracuse. And I know we're going to talk about other guys during the course of this draft, but I just had to get some rumors off my chest. That's all.
No worries. Those are some good nuggets heading into this exercise potentially. The Lamar Jackson thing could definitely shake up the top of the draft order. So that'd be very interesting, see if Baltimore does come down. Could see a myriad of teams be like, hey, first round pick for Lamar Jackson and someone else, we'll take that over, kind of the uncertainty you get at quarterback kind of past your top 1 or 2 guys when you start talking about Will Levis and Anthony Richardson. But that being said, round 1 could be very interesting this year. Other rumor is you might not see a quarterback go to. The very big rumor out there right now is, Adam Schefter's floated it. Been a few guys out there. Bryce Young seems to be the favorite now to go number 1 overall. Stroud just might fall just a little farther than people are expecting. And to much of my Indianapolis brethren, that is words from the mighty above coming down and saving their drafts. So, it'll be very interesting to see how the top half of this draft figures out, just because it'll impact, a lot of different things, players falling, players not. So with that being said, let's kind of get into our mock war room exercise here. As you guys know, in the past, us 3 will kind of debate picks. We've got a simulator going here that's going to help us kind of decide who's available and who's not at certain picks, so we can debate who the players who are available, so that we're going to kind of let the draft simulator tell us who's available and who's not. We're all going to be arguing for different points. I expect us all to kind of take on the jester role at times to kind of throw shade at people's players or pick.
Besides which, there are times when the other guy's pitching a player that you really think is the right pick, but you still have to come up with some names and make it fair.
Exactly. This whole point of this exercise is to give us a lot of different options for us to come together and kind of come down to the guy that we think could be the pick and will be our pick for this exercise and our purposes. So with that being said, let's get the draft simulator going and see.
So I have designated Jeremy, since it's your first year being the full-time host, to take the first spin at being the GM. So you get to see how this works.
Okay.
It's the worst job, by the way.
All right. Yeah.
And I will, if it's okay with you, Korey, I will take offense the first round, and you'll take defense, and then we'll just rotate the ball.
So what exactly? I have to argue for a defensive player.
The idea is that whoever's the offensive side, you'll pitch some potential choices at this slot for offensive players, and the defensive guy will pitch some defensive players, and then you might even say, after you pitched all your defensive guys, you might say, yeah, except for that guy he pitched is really the right guy, but it'll be up to the decision maker to either take one of those options or say, well, what about such and such? Why aren't we picking him? As imagine that Dan Rooney walked in the room,
Have fun, Jeremy.
Well, so I'm prepared if we want to, have the situation where Mike Tomlin walks into the
room. Oh, props! Had I known,
obviously,
had I only known we were going to be having props. No one told me we were having props. Okay, and I'm saying it's not impossible that we could accept a trade offer. So let's. I mean, I'm not saying that that's what we really want to do, because I think we would like to keep it somewhat Steelers-like, but I also think it's not impossible, right? That there would be a trade. So if we get something that feels like it's the right thing for us to do, maybe you'll decide that's the right thing to do. I know a lot of people are clamoring for the Steelers to trade down from one of their early picks, but I'm like, I'm spoiled. We have 3 picks in the top 49. Like, it seems like a little bit of sad to go to ditch all that just in favor of getting an extra pick.
I agree in a sense. So
So we'll see. If it works out, great, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. Let's see. Sorry, I had to take this down earlier. Mark draft. Phil, somebody talk about something for a second while I do this.
So, I mean, one thing I think will be very interesting, Will, you kind of brought up, as a very Steelers-like draft. I think this could be the first Steelers draft where we don't see it be a very Steelers-like draft. With Omar Khan running the ship this year, Andy Weidl setting the board. Don't get me wrong, Mike Tomlin, Art Rooney, and they all still make the pick at the end of the day, but it'll be very interesting to kind of see how their draft board falls this year, with Weidl setting, the board, hopefully it's not those years where it's like, oh, we need a corner so bad, we're going to take the sixth best corner, Artie Burns, God forbid something like that happen again. But I think it'll be very interesting. I think you could see, some up and down movement. There's been some talk where the Steelers could end up doing that. So
I know what I wanted to ask you. You said you looked at in preparation. You looked at last year's show where we did the mock draft for the Steelers. How did we do? Out of curiosity.
Well, funny enough, you nailed that George Pickens pick, in the second round. So I think you guys did pretty good there.
We didn't take Kenny Pickett, did we?
No. You guys were very, very against last year's quarterback class. So, we got to play devil's advocate this year as we try to build a team for Kenny this year as to what you guys were trying to do last year.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're getting there. The offseason certainly made things a lot more interesting because there's so many more additions to the team that are, filled in a lot of the gaps.
Yeah.
So anyway, we are now running the simulator. For those of you listening at home, Bryce Young first, CJ Stroud second, Will Anderson, Will Levis in the fourth spot, Tyree Wilson, Anthony Richardson, Christian Gonzalez, Paris Johnson, Broderick Jones, Jalen Carter, Devon Witherspoon, Jackson Smith, Najiba, Peter Skoronski, Addison, Brian Branch, and Joey Porter goes 16. So there goes that plan. So in a way, I guess I would say, according to like most of the people who are doing Steelers mocks, that seems like a lot of guys off the board that people were talking about, like the two of the tackles and Jordan Addison and Joey Porter. That eliminates some of the noise. So, Korey, would you like to go first on defense? You want me to go first?
I would love to go first. So there's a guy. I mean, I'm a huge Julius Brents fan, but 17 might be a little rich for him here. Am I mistaken? Nolan Smith went off the board, correct?
Nope, he's still there.
No, he did not.
Okay, well then Nolan Smith would 100% be my pick here. I think not only could he, potentially take the job from Highsmith, since we're going to have to pay him a lot of money if he even remotely matches his play from last year. But I think Nolan Smith could be a starting middle linebacker, and he could be one of the best in the league in a very short amount of time. So there's other guys that I could potentially argue. I mean, like Miles Murphy, if you want to go crazy as a potential Highsmith replacement, that's not horrible value. Lucas Van Ness could bump inside and play outside. But I'm going to firmly put my stamp on Nolan Smith.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's maybe a little early for the corners that are left. Just for what it's worth, I'm not a fan of Deonte Banks at 17. I know he's a guy that a lot of people have mocked to the Steelers. But as Corey's famously said, do you want a team that can't develop any corners to take a guy that needs to be developed? That's like one of those things. Like I feel that same way about taking a quarterback to a team that's offensively challenged. It's like it doesn't really help anybody. On the offensive side, I mean, it's really all about the tackles. We have Darnell Wright and DeJuan Jones available. And I mean, I guess I would say I don't think we're taking a wide receiver this early, but if you force me to come up with another offensive player besides a tackle, I guess I would say Zay Flowers. I think there's definitely holes in his game, but there's a guy that could end up being the idea of having Zay Flowers on one side and George Pickens on the other side. and flip-flopping, maybe with Deontay Johnson, if you keep him, that sounds like a ridiculous receiving core on one hand.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, there's some concentration drops and some sort of apparently he did not interview particularly well. I guess I heard from one team, one of the rumors I didn't share yet is that his interview was unbelievably and instantly aggressive. Like he got upset about something early and wouldn't back down, and they ended the interview prematurely. So that leads me to believe maybe he's not the best guy to bring in your locker room. But I'm going to say, if you're taking offense, you take one of those two tackles. I would say it's going to be almost impossible to decide between them. Darnell Wright is probably the best left tackle in this class. I don't know about probably. I think he is. And he is also pretty good in the run game and can play either side. Juwan Jones, I also think can play either side, but I would say he is more likely a dominant offensive tackle in the run game, which if you're Pittsburgh and you like to run the ball like it's 1995 or 3, then it's a really good fit. It'd be hard for me to argue. Like, I think if I were picking generically, I would pick Darnell Wright. If I'm picking for the Steelers, I think I'm picking DeJuan Jones. But I will say this. If you think, I'm talking about you, Jeremy, or you and Korey, if you think Nolan Smith can play off-ball linebacker as I do, I think he's the best off-ball linebacker in the draft. So to me, it's like nothing, very little this team has is like a huge glaring need, except for the need for a quarterback to step up and play elite football. But, and a new offensive coordinator. But like their draft, you could go any direction you want to go. But I think very few transcendent players in this draft. I think Nolan Smith is one of them.
I think even if we pigeonhole ourselves into, maybe taking some of these other positions of need because we're taking Smith early, I'm not saying linebacker is in a position of need, but, you don't have a guy who can really run in that group and coverage, and I think Nolan Smith can. I think with how we've filled out this roster in the offseason, we could just go BPA, and in my opinion, that's Nolan Smith right here.
Yeah, I'll step in here and
1 second. Just one more thing I would add. I think there'll be tackles available. I'm not sure how many more sort of special, speedy talents that can play off-ball linebacker as well that will be available. But I think the tackles, there's going to be maybe even one of those two guys that we just pitched. Sorry, Jeremy, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was going to step in here. I think you guys have both, presented good arguments. I feel like the linebacker class is deep, but not in that sense of effective guys off the ball that can run and stay with guys in coverage. I think there's a lot of guys, very similar to what we signed this offseason. I think there's plenty of a Landon Roberts types in this draft, Cole Holcomb types in this draft class. So, I don't want to wait till later just to kind of double down, even triple down on what we kind of have there. So, you kind of look at what the Steelers have done this offseason. They've invested 2 more picks in offensive linemen. So I kind of get this sense that there is a much bigger need to fix every spot on this offensive line. If they know if they want to go deep, that they need to keep adding more and more talent to this group. Now, I think we do have the luxury here that we have 3 guys at offensive tackle. We're only 14 picks away, from pick 32. Do we take that risk and see if one's still there? That's kind of where I'm leaning. I'm kind of with you guys on the special talent, Nolan Smith, personally. He's not only is he, a fantastic football player, everyone at Georgia says, he knows that defense so well. He's that team captain. His football intelligence is through the roof. His instincts are incredible. Not to mention he's such a plus athlete. The only other guy I'd really consider here that I consider, falling into that special talent range would be Miles Murphy, who's a little bit more of a traditional edge player. But everything, we've kind of read says they're prioritizing a Highsmith extension. We don't know what.
I can't imagine they're going to be able to do it. It's going to be 25 million plus, unless he's just absolutely flops this season. He's looking at it.
Gets himself back in our price range.
Yeah, exactly. That would be like the only reason he'd end up back. I just can't see spending 55 million plus on the two edge players. That seems like a bad business move. But I mean, maybe they have a plan that's better than that. But
I mean, we did it once when we, signed Woodley and Harrison to big deals, at the same time. And I mean,
and how'd that work? How'd that work out?
Well, it resulted in 2 Super Bowl runs, if I remember correctly.
Well, Woodley got hurt. He never really lived up to that deal when they finally did give him the big deal.
But I mean, that's fair. I mean, I'll give you that. But I'm just saying, when you have those 2 dominant type edge rushers, it changes the ball game a lot. So with that being said, with the first pick for the Steelers in our mock draft exercise, I'm taking Nolan Smith. Like you guys said, we feel like he can play off-ball linebacker, but he can come down and play pass rusher too. So I think that versatility is a big thing, that's factoring into this pick as well, just because you never know what's going to happen with Highsmith, like you guys said. They're going to try to re-sign him, but Nolan Smith gives you a little bit of positional flexibility there too. So I like Nolan Smith here.
Just spitballing some scheme stuff too. TJ Watt doesn't do the greatest when they are running towards him sometimes. He's not really a hammer a lot of the times. With the personnel you have, there's a lot of short yarded situations where TJ might be getting dinged up, where you drop Smith down to edge, and then that's when you bring in Roberts and Robinson and Holcomb, where you're kind of lessening the load of Watt just so he doesn't have to eat some of those tackle pins down to the kick outs, just all that junk. So that also I think might play a role, where if he came to Pittsburgh, he could also do that.
By the way, underrated thing about this is I think Cole Holcomb, very athletic. He's more athletic than most of the guys we played at Mac linebacker, that more coverage linebacker. But he's really he's a buck that's athletic. We've never had that. I mean, that's like way back in the day to get somebody like that. So you're now, if Nolan Smith takes some snaps at Mac, you're putting Cole Holcomb in a position where he's even better than he would be, where he's probably going to end up starting this year if we don't add to the scheme. So you basically now got a super athletic off ball front with 2 guys that can blitz and pass rush. Cole Holcomb's an underrated pass rusher, one of the best blitzers in the league. So I love the move from that standpoint. So good choice for your first choice. I have to admit I gave you a layup, but it's all good.
Which way do we rotate?
Oh, so next up, Korey will be the Conlon. Jeremy will be the offensive coordinator, and I'll be the defensive guy. And
okay, these are some big picks coming up.
I don't know if I'm going to read every pick. Cam Smith, Miles Murphy, Bijan Robinson at 20, Deontay Banks 21, Quentin Johnson, wide receiver, Kelly Ringo, Michael Meyer, Lucas Van Ness, Azal Koski, Brian Brisset, Will McDonald, Jamar Gibbs. Will McDonald might have been a target, and poor Corey. Darnell Wright goes 30 to Tennessee. Anton Harrison even 31. So 2 tackles did go, but only one of them was the one that we pitched earlier. So here's the deal. You got a trade offer. Do you see it?
No.
It is you can't see the screen?
No, I can see it. I'm saying no.
Oh, you say no to the deal. the offer is pick 38 and 70 in exchange for the Steelers pick 32 and 120. So it basically drops 6 to be able to move up 50 picks from the 4th round. Our GM says no. Do you want to make a counter offer? Would you go down to 38 for an extra pick, like in the,
They could give me a first next year. I'm not moving off the player that I'm thinking of right now.
All right. Well, you got to get pitched. So
yeah,
I think I get to go. I think I get to go first. So I'm on the defensive side.
Yep.
I'm gonna say we picked an inside linebacker. So Trenton Simpson probably not on the board there. And I kind of doubt we're going to even go to a different kind of linebacker, like you could do Darian Henley. But we've added so many linebackers and guards in this draft that you got to make a real compelling argument to add any more. The interior defensive lineman, Seika Ika. I think he's actually a better player than he's getting credit for lately. People are so down on any defensive tackle that has to ever come off the field, but those guys can be useful, especially when they are dominant. He was a little more dominant maybe earlier in his career than later, so that's a people think that people use against him. But I think mostly it's just the whole bias against having role players that do very specific things with big bodies. I'm not sure I would personally advocate for that pick right here, but if you love the player, it is a thing. We don't have, basically have one defensive lineman who's over 300 pounds. And I think, he weighed coming out of college 303 Feheko, but maybe he's, more like 320 now. But we don't really have any big defensive linemen, so that's worth mentioning. I think if you're going to go defense here, which I suspect that you're not, because I know where we're leaning, but I would say Adetomiwa Adebaware. Ding! Like an angel gets his wings.
Congratulations for pulling that name off. Yeah.
I've seen him getting mocked in the first round lately, and it's like I don't know if it's just that people have just discovered that he was like a monster tester and is a big motor player. The opinions are mixed. I know that for instance, somebody who's on the show is not necessarily he likes him, but maybe not that much. I personally think he's another really, like, you're gonna have Nolan Smith with some position flexibility. He's a guy like him. Adebaware is really intriguing because he can be an edge rusher in early downs. He can kick in to be in the nickel, to play the interior, and he did. You don't have to project to see that. That's what he did when he was in college. So, and I just feel like the analytics for edge rushers tell me that he could be extremely successful. If you want to go for a different type edge, Felix, what's the middle name? I know Uzama is the last name.
Enudike
Uzama from Kansas State is a little bit more. He's closer to where TJ Watt is in terms of the style of player that he is, but he's a big bend guy with length, and he can do a lot of really good things for you as well. Those are two really good edge rushers at this point. I'm not sure any of the other edge rushers who are expected to go in this range suit me or suit the 3-4, suit what the Steelers do, but I like those two a lot. Wil McDonald would be another one, but he went a little while ago, 4 or 5 picks ago. So that's about it. Safety, is still an issue for us. Maybe this is a round early for Chase Brown from Illinois, who's a really terrific safety. JL Skinner injured his pec in the draft process, doing the lifting, I think, at the combine. But he's a big dude who can run and play safety and would be an excellent fit alongside a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick. They sort of fill each other's weaknesses a little bit, like they're good complements for each other. So if you're thinking about safety and you feel it's more important, then that would be it. But that's it for defensive side. So I would say, really, I'm advocating for either one of those.
No mention of corner.
We'll say again.
No mention of the corners.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm remiss. I didn't color it in with the right color. I'm dependent on spreadsheets at my age. Yeah, like the people, the corner that people think is going to go next would be Cam Smith from South Carolina, but I know that I think Julius Brents is a better cornerback than that, and it depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for somebody that you want to be able to go inside, flip inside and out, Brent's probably not the strongest inside cornerback, but I think he's maybe a top 3 outside corner in the class. So that would be the other thing. So one of those two great pass rushers, or a safety, or Julius Brents. I guess JL Skinner, Julius Brents, or one of the pass rushers would be the defensive side. I'm sorry for going on so long.
No worries. I'll take over from here. Will, would you mind clearing the search bar on the draft simulator so I can see who else is there?
You want to cheat? I see. Okay.
Well, in this real exercise, I'm going to know who's on the board, so I don't call that cheating. But
yeah, but it gives you an idea like how soon players are going to go rather than just who's available. But that's okay, man.
Right. I'll start off with wide receivers here. We already mentioned Zay Flowers. I feel like he could kind of be a special guy. I know there's some maybe some character concerns there. Very good football player though. I'm a big believer in Josh Downs. Kid is just outright slippery if you want one of those types, but Steelers have an unproven guy in Calvin Austin. So I think I'm kind of willing to kind of wait there. And, with Allen Robinson then adding to the mix now, wide receiver kind of seems like a luxury this early if we want to go offensively. Running back wise, there's really no one here. I feel like the Steelers have their 1-2 punch at this point. Throw a different name out there. If we really wanted to get really run aggressive, Darnell Washington could be a very interesting pick here. He is an outlier for his position, his size, his speed, his ability to block in line, yet go out and be an athletic pass catcher. If we really want to run the hell out of this ball, 3 yards in a cloud of dust type of stuff, he'd make a very interesting tight end, maybe number 1, number 2. Even though I know Pat Freiermuth, is our guy. And he's kind of really seemed to take off last year as far as the receiving end goes too. So he's becoming more of a reliable target, especially for Pickett, as the year went on. He was the safety blanket. So I don't think the Steelers are going to add a tight end there. I think the pick here, if you really want to consider beefing up our offensive line and making it a much better unit, a guy the Steelers have already been after, DeJuan Jones seems like a no-brain pick here. People are talking about, him going in the first round because of his size, his special ability. Will, you even mentioned, this could be a guy that could end up playing left tackle. So I think that versatility combined with his size, his ability in the run game just to blow people off their socks at 6'8", 300 and something. We won't say it here because it's going to fluctuate his entire career probably. But I would, I'm banging my fist on the table for DeJuan Jones here, even though I know there's some offensive tackles later. I don't think there's anyone that brings what DeJuan Jones brings to the table at this point in the draft.
What's funny is I think I love all the prospects that have been pitched so far. Like some part of me would be happy with any of them, but the DeJuan Jones I just get this impression of the Steelers with DeJuan Jones on the move, crossing the formation and coming into the hole, and some safety thinks he's got a down, coming downhill to the football, and then you see that dude come around the corner. Just like I feel like that suits what they do. But you're the GM, and I know you love two of the other players mentioned. So
yeah, so in the right circumstance here, I could have been talked into Darnell Washington if I would say 2 other players were off the board. However, I don't think there's any world where the Steelers don't and where I don't go DeJuan Jones here. I see this thing on, across Steelers Twitter and Steelers Instagram, all any place where people discuss Steelers stuff. And people question what happens with Chucks, who stays. I think it's pretty simple. I think Chucks goes to your left tackle. He played left tackle in college. He was ready to play left tackle before Banner got injured in preseason. I'm pretty sure that's his more natural position. And like so many others, the Steelers have been playing him out of position for a little while just because Dan Moore was more comfortable at left tackle than he was at right tackle. Kind of similar to the Darnell Wright situation at Tennessee, I think, where you have a young guy who can play one side, or you have an older guy who can play both sides. Younger guy is only better at one side, so Darnell Wright got kicked to right tackle. I think it's the same situation with Dan Moore and Chucks, where Chucks is the better left tackle. So I think that's pretty easy, and I think your line's pretty set then, where DeJuan's at right, Chucks is at left. Then, there's even room for a guard later, I think, because from a lot of the visits, it doesn't look like the front office is that sold on Cole. But for this pick, it's 100% DeJuan Jones for me.
Do you guys think, first of all, I think it's a great pick. I endorse it wholly. I think also, once again, just like I said about the tackles before, I think there's going to be a corner there later.
It's a deep class.
Right? Yeah,
I'm comfortable with a lot of guys at 47 at corner.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think. Or is it 49? It's 49, is it not?
49, yes, 49.
Sorry. All right, so I'm selecting DeJuan Jones. You're going to see some players go by. If anybody notable goes by, I guess I'll mention it. But Zay Flowers there at 37. Josh Down
came off.
Darnell Washington at 40, right on the number. Emmanuel Forbes, who might have been in play. Yeah. Adewale, John Michael Schmitz, the center. Joe Tippmann, another center. Luke Musgrave, and Trenton Simpson. All right. So now I am Conlon. Korey is the offensive guy, and Jeremy is a defensive guy. And I think it's Corey's chance to go first.
So yeah, I'll open up here. I think that, even though I just mentioned, I just talked about it, I think that there's definitely room to explore adding a guard to this O-line. I think a guy like Cody Mausch could be a fantastic fit at right guard and bumping James Daniels to center. And then, there's some receivers here if that's the route you want to go, where you've got like Trey Palmer, and I feel like that's a guy specifically who's a great fit. But I mean, you could also look at adding a tight end where a guy like Tucker Kraft, who does a lot of things Pat does, probably a little better inline blocker. Having two guys like that could be a real weapon. I mean, Gentry's a non-factor in the pass game, as hard as we tried with the screens and all that junk. And Connor Hayward does not run many routes out of a traditional inline. So you could actually run a lot of tight end routes, or a lot of 12 personnel where you have two tight ends in two tight end spots running combination routes. So I think there's an argument for Cody Mausch, especially right here. I think there is an argument for, let me get my sheet, because then I know there's another one. I think there is an argument for Steve Avila here. That's the guy I would really like to see. That's a guy who could play center or guard. So those are the two guys I'm throwing my hat in the ring for.
Is it too greedy to think about adding Blake Freeland to play left tackle?
No, I don't think so. However, I think I would rather add a guard there. I think I'd rather have Mason Cole and a better, because I think Cody Mausch and Steve Avila are better guards than Freeland is tackle. But at the very least, it's intriguing because Freeland has sky high upside. And I mean, just think about Blake Freeland and DeJuan Jones being your two tackles. I mean, that is so much size. I mean, think of how wide you could set that pocket with nothing coming from the outside. So I think it's worth a thought, but I feel like there is an outside chance he might get there at 72. It's not likely, but that's a guy where you maybe think BPA in the 70s, where I said 70 or 80, late 70s. So that's a guy where maybe BPA at 80 is where you take a look at him.
I'm just curious, like I kind of expect with all the moves that they've made, I sort of expect James Daniels to go to center. That's what I see when I see the guys that they've brought in as free agents, and then the guys that they've visited with. So I sort of feel like, they could have Nate Herbig play, but really what they're looking for here is if there's a possibility of getting a center or a guard that they really like, that they could do either. But yeah, it's like I feel like, Weidl or Connor both came in and they were like, yeah, what we really need to do is rebuild this freaking offensive line. So I wouldn't be surprised if by next year all five guys are changed over from what we had last year. So anyway, sorry. Let's hear about the defensive side.
Sure. Are we scrolled all the way up on the board?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Nope. There you
go. Okay. So we haven't added a defensive lineman yet. There's a very athletic guy at the top of the board here, Mazi Smith. Is a guy we've supposedly talked to in the pre-draft process. I can't remember if we brought him in on a visit or not. I don't think we did. But, he's the type of nose tackle that could really, help free up some things. He's a 6'3", 330-pound guy who moves really well. My only concern there is he hasn't always sealed the deal in Michigan. He's a guy who disrupts a lot, but doesn't always collect the paycheck at the end. He doesn't always get to the quarterback. He does do a lot of disruption, though. And a guy we've already talked about, if we really want insurance for TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith potentially leaving, Felix Anudike-Uzomah is still here. I think that'd be a really good value pick at 49. It would shore up one of the weakest depth spots across our roster. I think he's that guy. Another edge player that some people are high on. I'm a little high on too. Derek Hall from Auburn kind of seems built to play 3-4 outside linebacker. In all honesty, not quite as sudden as Felix, which is why I'd go with Felix more, but he's on the board, so I felt like I'd mention him. He's a guy who can rush the passer. He does have a little bit of bend to his game. However, we have not addressed the secondary yet. We still don't think we have a good quality starting strong safety yet. We haven't selected a young corner yet to learn behind Patrick Peterson, but both of those spots really need an infusion of young talent. One guy I noticed on the board right away, guy we've already talked about a little bit, Julius Brents. This kid is so stinking good. And I think to get a corner like him at 49 with how he can turn and run at 6'3", over 200 pounds, he just checks a lot of boxes for me.
Mm-hmm.
He's got good hands. He's got a little more pass breakups to his stat sheet than interceptions, but I think that'll come over time, when he settles into a spot, learns a spot there. Safety wise, a guy I was very high on, a guy who I actually tried to, kind of lure to Indiana when I was there, Antonio Johnson. He's a kid from Chicago, very good player at Texas A&M, kind of plays that slot role pretty well. But I think he can also play deep safety, come down, help out, and support the run. He's another 6'3", 200-pound defensive back. He's more of a safety though, so he's not a true slot corner. He's not a true safety, but his versatility, kind of that the ability to wear multiple hats in this defense, to complement Mika Fitzpatrick. That's very alluring to me. And then a guy who might be a little early here for, guy who I really like Jordan Battle from Alabama. I'm higher on him than I think others are. I like his overall athletic profile as a guy who can really complement what the Steelers like to do. He's a little farther down the board. So honestly, right here, I'd be pounding my fist to get a secondary player. This is a team that needs an infusion of young talent in the secondary. So I would be very okay with either safety here. I'd even lean a little bit more Jordan Battle if we want a traditional, strong safety. I feel like we have guys that, Keanu Neal, who can come down and play the slot, play more of a dime linebacker there. So I don't know if the need for another bigger dime linebacker type in Antonio Johnson's there. If we want a traditional strong safety, I think Jordan Battle's our guy here. Or if we really want to go corner, even though I know corners deeper in this class, I think getting Julius Brents here at pick 49 would really go a long way to getting a young talent back into our cornerback room with us letting Cam Sutton walk.
If they were both healthy, would you take Jordan Battle, or if all three were healthy, you would take, how would rank the safeties for me? Jordan Battle, Sidney Brown, and JL Skinner for the Steelers.
Ooh, that's tough because JL Skinner reminds me a lot of what we had in Terrell Edmonds, except I think he's a better all-over athlete. I think he's a better football player off the top of our head. With Edmonds, it was more better athlete, good football player, as to where I think Skinner is a better combination of all of those, to be honest. Personally, I like Battle the most just because I want a more traditional, strong safety just to kind of complement out the rest of the defense. But I honestly would be okay with all of them. For me, it would go Battle, Skinner, Johnson.
Now, let me ask this: if Trenton Simpson was not taking the pick before, how would you factor him, thinking of him as a safety instead of a linebacker?
I don't really like him as a safety, in all honesty. I think he's a little too top heavy to play safety. I think he's the run and chase linebacker. I just don't see him doing enough in coverage for me to put him back at safety. I think there's too much tightness, especially backpedaling, for that to be a good fit for what we want to do. The Steelers traditionally have always liked safeties to be able to complement each other, take on each other's role a little bit. And I think that's where Battle and Skinner come out ahead for me, because athletically, I know those are guys that can do it. And, they did it pretty well, at their respective schools too. So safety wise, for me, it's Battle, Skinner, Antonio Johnson.
Gotcha. Okay. And the one name that I didn't hear mentioned, DJ Turner. How do you feel about DJ Turner? Corner out of
I like DJ. I think he's a very good athlete. I kind of worry about combine freaks. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a good football player. I think he tested a little faster than what he plays. So I just kind of want a guy outside that has more size too. I think his size a little bit.
I think something you factor with DJ Turner is that maybe he's an every down slot. But if you think of him as, because everyone wants to think of like the tough guys to guard in the league, but if you think of him as like a Stephon Diggs eraser instead of Julius Brents as like a Jamar Chase eraser, I think that's where you see more value in a guy like Turner, where a lot of slots aren't as good in coverage. Like they can play, but there's slot corners in there because of foot speed or because they're short or something. DJ Turner's 5'11", but I think his coverage. Well, the reason I like him is because his coverage ability is good enough to play with those elite slot guys. So that's why I'm high on him. But I think I'd be looking Brents here over Turner. But I think there's an argument.
Yeah, I just wanted to hear the conversation. I mean, I think slot is very valuable, like a slot corner that's really good at, like, we missed Mike Hilton. When Mike Hilton was here,
God, yes.
He did so many different kinds of things well that you really noticed him when he was gone, and try to replace him with, the Arthur Maulet's or Norwoods of the world. And so, yeah, I kind of I feel differently a little bit about slot corner than I did 10 years ago. But the slot corners are playing more, and they're more vital pieces of the defense, right? So I won't just discount a guy like DJ Turner because I think to myself, well, he's better in the slot, so therefore he's not as valuable. Because it used to be that way, right? The outside corners were more valuable. And
that's worth noting because we only really have boundary corners on our roster at the moment. We don't really have a good slot corner. So I mean that's definitely a thing there. If you think he's a guy who can play inside and out, I said it for a few other guys. Versatility is key. So the more you can do, the fact that he's such a great athlete, and proportionally, he's actually got pretty good length for him too. So I don't think, size wise, I should really knock him so much for that because he's a guy that gets his hands up and gets in passing lanes. So
I think he's a guy that you could play him outside if you need to, and he'd be fine. But he's more suited to being inside, and is probably aggressive enough. I kind of feel though that is, it is a deep corner class. We keep saying there's no athletes like DJ Turner. There's not that many athletes like that. Let's put it that way. Left, but there are some guys that fit that mold a little bit more. The outside corners with the size and athleticism and skill, like football skills, that Julius Brents has, kind of winning me over. Before I finalize that choice, I just want to say I do think, I'm not, since we're sort of BPA-ish more this year than usual, that a guy like Tucker Kraft, I think, was a really good suggestion. I feel like that was a guy that Korey put up, I think. It's been so long ago. I talked so much since then. But I like Tucker Kraft a lot. And I think as a move tight end, he's not going to be like the guy that lines up in run formation and is a really good blocker. But he definitely adds something. You'd have a nice 1-2 punch with him and Freiermuth. I just don't think that it's like, in a way with Freiermuth, I think you either need to get a guy who is an excellent blocker and a pretty good receiver, or a guy who is just an absolutely clearly better receiver in every way than Freiermuth. But, more likely the first. Like if I'm going to add somebody, I think I'm going to add a great blocker who can play and let Freiermuth move around a little bit. That seems like a better compliment. So I just feel like we've waited for corner. Corner is definitely important. And I feel like I wouldn't have cried if we picked Julius Brents at 17. I would have been satisfied in the 32, and I'm happy with him at 49. So it's going to be.
I mean, people are talking about Brents potentially going in round 1, so I feel like it's just such a great value here too.
Yeah,
you're on offense, and it's kind of subject to everyone. I mean, that's the thing is like a lot of the analysts, they kind of feed off each other, and they rank that they're especially the big analysts, they're afraid to rank guys a lot higher than other guys. But every team has their own board, and these teams' boards do not look like what a lot of these analyst boards look like. So if you think look at the Patriots with Cole Strange. He had a great year. If you think your guy won't be there at the next pick, or even if you think he's just that worth it at that pick, then you take him. So
I mean, How did Skip Bayless do selecting Malik Willis in the first round last year? I mean, talk about guys that get, hyped so much to where it's like, oh, they have to go here, but no one's really listening to what's going on with these teams. I think there could be a lot of interesting players going round one this year.
I think it's a year where there's a little bit more mystery to round one than there has been in recent years.
Absolutely.
Did you see the Merrill Hodge bit with
yes.
Bayless? That was the best because he was like Merrill Hodge basically nailed everybody that he talked about in the class, like he just nailed to a T. So that was a very
in the Steelers scouting office.
Yeah, we like that. I mean, I like Malik Willis after his first year starting, and in the second year it kind of fell apart for him, and it's like that happens because teams start to see you more, they get a feel for what you're trying to do, and you try to overdo it a little bit. You're trying to prove something. So I do understand that at one point there was some hype there that seemed to be justified. But yeah,
I will say it's not like you went into an easy position either, where those were must-win games for Tennessee, and
once again, you're sending you send a quarterback who needs to be developed to a team that plays football like it's Neanderthal age. So the guys, you watch wherever the quarterbacks go this year, if they go to a team where they've got some offensive minds that are smart and think outside the box and figure out how to do things and how to develop the player, they'll be more successful. Even if we right now on paper don't think they're the better quarterback prospect. Perfect example, Brock Purdy. Like, watch all the film you want in college of Brock Purdy, and it's like there's some stuff there. He's not terrible, but nobody was looking at that film last year and thinking, "Oh, this guy's going to be like, win 10 games in a row, or whatever." Right?
So there were WTF plays in that film, like the plays that everyone knows the like throw backwards. Like he's not doing that in the NFL, but there's a play where he got sacked, and then as he's going down, throws the ball 10 yards backwards completely voluntarily. Like. It's sometimes you just never know with these guys.
Like you get to the sideline, the coach is like, "All right, so tell me what you were thinking when you threw the ball back." I just want to know. Anyway, so I picked Julius Brents. By the way, when we get to pick 140, speaking of boards, we get to pick 120 rather, and we know we don't have another pick for like 200 picks. We could take somebody completely outside the box there, and it wouldn't blow my mind because at that point, you're considering literally 100 players that you think might not be there. So it's like I'm not going to complain with whoever gets picked at that spot, although I'll complain anyway. That's my job. But so Julius Brents is the pick. So far, just for those of you keeping track at home, the one thing I do not like about this simulator is it doesn't show you who you picked.
So we've gone.
If you click the logo next to Brent's.
Next to Brent's? Oh, here.
Yep.
Well, there you go. They say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. They're wrong. There you go. So at 17, we picked Nolan Smith, the edge from Georgia. 32, DeJuan Jones, an offensive tackle from Ohio State. The nightmare for all defenders in the run game. And 49, Julius Brents, cornerback from Kansas State. I feel like, if you've ever had that dream where you realize that you're playing, in your dream, you're looking at your lottery ticket, and like you got the first number, you got the second number, and you got the third number, and you're like on to the fourth number, and it's like in your dream, you're like, wow, it's amazing. That's what this draft is like right now. So
yeah,
I mean, we should all be so lucky if they do this well in the first three picks. Okay, so let's see what happens next for the next go round. Let's see here what happened.
I'm on defense. Jeremy's GM, you're on offense.
There you go.
Zoma's gone.
Conlon. Oh, I missed you.
Great value for Drew Sanders there.
Barry's there.
Yeah, see, we didn't talk Drew Sanders because we already picked Nolan Smith, in a way.
Yeah.
It's a shame because Drew Sanders can play.
Clark Phillips, that was a guy worth considering at this next pick, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe.
If we hadn't gone corner.
Even if we did. Yeah, it's a different spot.
It's true. A.T. Perry is a wide receiver that just went. He's someone that I think would be on the Steelers board.
Mm-hmm.
I think. My take would be that there are A.T. Perrys available later that are very similar, but at a lower price tag. So I think the price tag is kind of high at 77. But I do think that is a guy that fits. We should be thinking about Steelers needs. Saiki Ika went. Mozzie Smith, Tucker Kraft, Drew Sanders. Just trying to get people.
Could you go to the safeties real quick, just so I can see?
Just if you're if you're listening along at home and not watching along with this, I just wanted to say some of those guys. Going to safeties. The safeties, JL Skinner still there? It looks like we lost the other two guys that we discussed on the last go round.
Yeah, we lost Battle and Johnson.
And Sidney Brown. Yeah,
and
Sidney Brown.
Yeah.
Who I know is a Korey favorite. Okay, so bada bum, bada bing, bada bing, boom, Steelers value board I have on here. Okay, so we're at 80. We're at pick 80. So this is the 4th round, pick 80. Jeremy is the GM. I am the offense again, and Korey is defense. I guess that means Korey's going.
Okay, so JL Skinner's the guy who's screaming my name right now. I'll open up with him. We talked about him earlier. That's a guy who will mesh very well with Minka. He's a lot more dynamic than Edmonds is how I would put it. Not going to say that he would come in and be a better player than Edmonds. Edmonds played good football for us, but harder hitter, faster to break on balls, better ball skills, just more dynamic in that aspect. I think another guy to mention, could you click the corners real quick, Will? I want to make sure he's there because he's listed as a corner or listed as a safety. Okay, so Quan/Jartavius Martin is another guy here that I think would be a great pick in my opinion. He's played snaps at slot. He's played outside corner. He's played safety. I think he meshes well with Minka at safety if that's where you want him, which is probably where we'd use him. And I think he could be the best slot we've had since Mike Hilton. He's a bit different of a slot. He's a bit different frame, a bit different mentality than Hilton. But I think, looking at edge too, I think DJ Johnson's a guy who might be more of a 4-3 kind of guy. But I think if you have him do what you ask Highsmith to do a lot of the time, I think he fits that really well because Highsmith is kind of thought of as more of our run stopper. And I think at D tackle, there's so many guys you have to consider here. So I know Carl Brooks should still be available if I'm thinking. So Carl Brooks is still available. He's low. He's low on the PFN board. I think this is right around where you start to think about him. I know the Steelers are in love with Keanu Benton. So that's a guy who I like him. I don't necessarily like him here at 80. Zach Pickens is the guy me and Jeremy like. Again, not sure how much they changed that D-line room from what we have in there. I think Carl Brooks would be my guy out of this entire list of players here, simply because I think he adds a pass rushing threat from the inside that we haven't had since Tuitt. Even Cam Hayward, he's a great pass rusher, but he gets there by way of bull rush and long arm. Those aren't necessarily quick wins. I think if you have Carl Brooks in there, you add a lot of speed. I think you add, it's a good anchor. He's a guy who can even go out there and play edge. If you want him to be, he could be an edge for you. So I think he's kind of like a souped up DeMarvin Leal, if you want to think about him in that aspect. Yeah. And I think this would be a good value for him. But if I had to pick my guys out of this group, I would say JL Skinner would be my choice here, simply because of that gaping hole we have. I'm not sure Keanu Neal is really a good starter. He might be solid fill gap, but I don't think that's a guy we should be relying on, especially back deep. And Carl Brooks is a guy that I could completely get behind here. I think that's, even though he's listed low on the PFN board, I think that's a guy that would be a fantastic fit, and it's just a fantastic player overall.
Just said two things about Carl Brooks. I know the numbers were not good at his workout, but apparently he was really sick. Like he would have been home in bed sick, but he agreed to come and do the workout anyway. I think actually teams were more impressed by that than they were worried about his numbers not being all that, because I think it's pretty hard to do drills and go through your workout when you feel sick as a dog. Like I think that would probably add a few tenths to your time doing anything. The second thing I was going to say is I do think this is a really good draft for guys who offer something similar. Not to say that, I don't love Brooks, because I really do. But you have Moro Ojomo and Jalen Redmond, two guys from the Big 12, who kind of offer that same position flexibility. If they were all three used in their career as edge players, as interior rushers, as nickel pass rushers, and with their hand in the dirt going against guards, and all had some success with that. And they're all slightly different from one another. Carl Brooks is more likely to kind of bowl you over. Redmond is more of like a quick first step guy to win at the immediate on the battle, and Jomo has a little bit of length to him, maybe more suited to five tech in Pittsburgh's scheme. But it just feels like add that to Adebawore, feels like you have a nice group of guys who offer you something in a league where there's a lot of nickel pass rushing to be done, and only so many fresh bodies for the Steelers are good at that, because they've, I'm not, like Korey said, he's not sure how much they're going to add the defensive line room, but they, the one thing they don't really have enough of is interior pass rushers. And I guess you could say 99 is that, along with Cam Hayward, but the other guys are not really going to line up there and give you good pass rush snaps in the interior, it feels like. Okay, so I have offense here, yeah?
I already say you're supposed to be offense, yeah.
Sorry, I just was admiring the choices that are available there. It's so much fun to have all these picks in the top 80. Like,
yeah, I'm going to say, especially at 49, I would be jumping out of my seat at 49 if I saw all those names available.
Right.
Yeah, it's I think it's just we're have more picks than usual right now, which is in the early part of the draft, which is super. Which is why when people are talking about trading shit away, that I'm like, oh my god, like we have we never have the opportunity to get so much talent. Plus, I think the Steelers believe, whether we think it or not, that they are they're immediate contender mode right now. So they're like thinking we want to get players who not only have talent but can play right now and contribute and maybe even start for us, and that means higher picks, in the NFL way of thinking of things, right?
Would you guys rather have Isaiah Loudermilk and Akello Witherspoon or the number 80 overall pick?
Yeah, there's absolutely zero doubt in my mind. I'd rather have the 120, I think.
Yeah, I was about to say, I might even be okay with a top fourth round.
I think this might be a time where the Steelers might start thinking about wide receiver. I mean, there is a big pile of wide receivers with similar grade for me that are left in this class. I mean, it goes from here all the way down to undrafted free agents. Depending on what style and type you're looking for, I think that there are guys very similar talent level. So that doesn't mean that you have to pick one now, but it means once we get to this point of the draft, then I think it starts to at least become a consideration, because there are still some really good guys left. If you look at the wide receivers available here, Trey Palmer, I love a lot about Trey Palmer's game, and I think he is the kind of wide receiver the Steelers might like. I think, people talk about concentration drops. I think Trey Palmer has the most trouble with actual drops of any of the sort of, wide receivers that have more of a reputation. Super fast, gets open, makes plays, can run with the football after he gets it. But I don't think he is good enough at all of those things to overcome the lack of dependability. I mean, it's some really serious drop issues, like 20 or something. I mean, like that's a lot of drops, especially in college where you're mostly, it's wide open balls. Granted, maybe he didn't have always the best quarterback play around him. Tyler Scott is a guy that I know is a big combine thing, but it's not really my deal. Nathaniel Dell, if we didn't essentially draft Calvin Austin this year already, I love Nathaniel Dell. I think he has a chance to be one of the most successful wide receivers in this class. I mean, he has a chance. He's not as fast as the cheetah, but he's a guy that is scary. He can't be covered in man coverage, inside or out. He was the number one wide receiver in this draft in terms of yards per target facing man coverage, and looks every bit of that. Steelers, I think, will like Jalen Reed. I love Jonathan Mingo. I can't believe he's still on the clock here.
Yeah, I was going to say something. There's a couple outliers on Pro Football Network's stuff. So, like a Jonathan Mingo, where there's been pretty consistent reports for a couple months now about him going around. Are we just going to turn a blind eye to the
try to
outliers?
be realistic with it? I mean, I would say it's not out of the question at 80, just because there's so many wide receivers that all it takes is a couple of teams to prefer other ones earlier, and then everybody else is like, I'm going to wait. At some point, there'll be sort of a run on wide receivers. It just hasn't happened yet. It wouldn't surprise me if it happens a little bit between now and the next pick, because that's 40 slots. But Yeah, Jonathan Mingo is a guy that sort of can't help remind you of Juju Smith-Schuster. He's clearly that kind of player. He maybe isn't the most dynamic, catcher of the football. He's not like the best form receiving or that kind of stuff, but his overall game is excellent. I think he'd be a great compliment. Bryce Ford Wheaton, I think, is a little bit too much like George Pickens in terms of where he would fit, but I do think he's a fast guy who wins jump balls, and he could take a screen for a touchdown and beat you over the top with speed and height. So I think he'll be a good player. I'm just not sure he's the best complement to what the Steelers have. And I would be remiss not mentioning Parker Washington, who may be on the board next time around. Probably will be on the board the next time around. But best hands in the draft, hands down, not even close. Maybe isn't the most dynamic athlete, but yet he finds a way to like make people miss and get yards after the catch. So that'd be the wide receiver room. And then the one other guy that sort of pops up here for me is Izzy Abanikanda, the running back from Pitt. It's like I don't think you really need to add running back 3 as quickly to the Steelers. But if you wanted to add something that offers something different than what the Steelers currently have, you had a guy with that speed. I'm not sure the value that he brings to you on special teams, which is something that he would need to do as the number 3 running back. But I feel like I have to at least mention him here because I'm sure he's on their board. I just don't know how much they prioritize that position right now.
Gotcha. Well, you guys have definitely made some good arguments for a lot of different players here. Will, if you could go to the overall board, just kind of give me a better sense here.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that's still screaming to me is, well, we need a guy who can like be the safety for years to come. KZ is more of a free safety. He's not really a strong safety. Keanu Neal, let's face it, last year, when he played for Dallas, it was more at linebacker than traditional safety. So, I mean, we still don't have a traditional safety on the roster. And Skinner, I wouldn't call him traditional, but he at least has the ability to be a traditional safety with his side, his speed, his athleticism. It's kind of where I'm leaning, but you guys made some good points, for some defensive linemen, a few others here, but I like JL Skinner here. I do. I think we need another young athletic guy to put in our secondary or whatever. Now we've got 3 JL Skinner at 6'3". We've got Jarius Brents at 6'3". Like we were adding some length to our secondary too. Akella Witherspoon, he's another big long corner. He was a guy I thought honestly was going to get cut this offseason just to get the money saved or whatever. They clearly liked enough from what they've seen from him to think that he could have a bounce back year this year. So I think having him, with that size, I think that's the way I want to go here.
I was going to say, by the way, we added Nolan Smith and Cole Holcomb in the middle as well. Like it's a real strange thing to have length because we don't seem to have any of that in the middle of the field. But
and then the other thing that Skinner brings is we have some real closing speed to the middle of the field too. We have not had that. We've had guys who run 2 spots, but we don't have guys that close on spots the way I feel like we've added some guys, this offseason and in this draft in general. So I like JL Skinner here, and let's make him the pick at pick 80.
Great.
3 for 3.
I got the question for you guys. 3 for 3 or 4 for 4? Did you not like one of them?
I chose the other one. My pitches have been the guy for the other 3.
Oh, you're pitching the right guys.
I could be the reason for the Steelers' demise.
So you're Andy. You try to say you're Andy Weidel. I like it.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask you guys a couple of questions. One is, the fact that Skinner is injured right now. When he tore his pec, it seemed like it'd be like 7 months, and that would put him missing the start of the season. But maybe he's a TJ Watt type of bicep or pec tear, and maybe he recovers more quickly. Or bicep. I don't know if it's pec or bicep, but pec is longer recovery, I think. So Even so,
It was Peck.
yeah, even so, I think it's still a good pick because you can get by with Keanu O'Neal and rotating a cast of thousands, and they actually have the guy they signed from the XFL last year.
Kenny Robinson.
Yeah, Kenny Robinson, who played at West Virginia, is not a bad player. Like he's a step up from what the backup safety situation has been in Pittsburgh for a while. So I hope that he gets a chance. I could see him being a good backup, for them at least. The question I was going to ask you though was, Kazee, I thought when he got signed that he was going to be the slot guy, that he would basically be the slot corner. And I feel like that's a role that he can thrive in. So in the context of what we've been talking about so far, how comfortable would you be with him being a slot corner if we don't end up getting another slot player?
But with him and Millette manning the slot, it wouldn't deter me from a guy if it's a guy I like later in the draft. But I feel like, it might be another year where we push it off and then we finally take a guy who can really play in the slot next year, because I think Kazee is serviceable in the slot. I think his coverage ability is a step up from Millette. It doesn't need to be great in there. And I mean, there's the rumors of Patrick Peterson playing in the slot. So maybe you get into some dime situations and he gets on the better receivers. So I think with the guys in the room right now, Levi Wallace is a guy I also think could play in the slot. That's another one that I thought of. So I'd be fine with what we have currently, but that wouldn't stop me later. If there's a guy where I'm like, man, he shouldn't be there, then.
Right. In even before this mock draft that we're just doing, the Steelers' ability to cover big slots has already improved just because their linebackers are better, than they were at that particular role. So I feel like we're addressing some of the long-term issues. Like this team really hasn't had a dynamic off-ball linebacker since Ryan Shazier. They haven't really been able to cover the middle of the field. So like their safety coverage, their slot coverage, their linebacker coverage in the middle of the field has been atrocious actually for the last 5 or 6 years. So I think we've addressed some of that. It feels great. The one thing we didn't do that we probably should have done is look at the trade offer at 80, because I'm looking at that next one and it's like 120 to 241. Damn. Like it would be nice to get an extra pick.
Yeah, in between
there somewhere, right? Just so we don't feel like there's some guy who's available and we're like, dang it, we're going to miss out, Anyway, so that's for next time. We missed that.
120 has always been the pick that I like to trade back more of.
Me too. And I think there's a really good chance JL Skinner would be gone if you move back even 5 picks from there. So feels like if that's going to be your pick, it's better not to trade back. Trey Palmer.
Diane Henley, 91.
Diane Henley is a nice pick, linebacker like him. Zach Harrison, maybe not a fit for the Steelers, but pretty good 4-3 outside guy.
Dell's gone.
Quan Martin.
Bonaconda. Yeah, Quan Martin goes. Thankfully, someone picked Jacqueline Roy, who I don't like.
Carrington Valentine, that guy screams Steelers if we go off previous corner picks.
He's a guy in the mock draft exercises. I took in both. Very much like that guy.
He's just underclassman from an SEC school with some production. That screams Steelers DB.
Former wide receiver too.
And actually, the last 4 guys off the board are all guys that would be in consideration for the Steelers in real life at this point. Jair Brown, the safety from Penn State. Xavier Hutchinson, wide receiver from Iowa State. Alex Austin, corner from Oregon State. And Michael Wilson, the wide receiver at Stanford. Those are all guys that would fit the Steelers pretty well.
Let's look at this, Will. Let's look at this.
Oh, yeah. Now, here we go. So, wait.
I'm all about this.
Just for a second. Korey is Conlon. He's Amar Khan and Mike Tomlin. Or maybe we should be like a Conlon Weidel. I don't know.
I think Conlon rolls.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love this offer, though.
Wait, before we get into the offer, just quickly, Corey's the GM. Jeremy is talking offense. I'm talking defense. But we have a trade offer. It's pick 120 for the Steelers, going to Tennessee in exchange for pick 128 and 172, which is the kind of thing that we were looking for and would be thrilled probably to take. But before we do that, let's just make sure that there isn't anybody coming up and say the next 10 or 15 picks that we're going to cry that we lost out on by doing this deal. So the top of the board, according to this resource, Zach Kuntz, the tight end from Old Dominion, probably not really a Steelers fit. I don't know. how I feel about that. Chase Brown, the running back from Illinois, probably once again Steelers priority, not so much. Nick Hampton, it says edge, but I think Nick Hampton from Appalachian State is going to end up being an off-ball linebacker.
McClendon Curtis.
Oh, sorry. McClendon Curtis, the interior player, but he's quite a ways down on the list here. So I feel like it's unlikely that
Byron Young has been someone the Steelers have shown some interest in.
I thought it was the other Byron Young, the one from Tennessee.
I don't think so.
I can't remember.
Yeah, because the funny thing about that is Byron Young from Tennessee is a little overaged, and he's already gone in this draft as well. But Byron Young from Alabama, I'm not sure he's that good. That concerns me. I'm sure they're interested because it's Alabama, and they have this Alabama defensive line connection thing that they got going, right? But he seems to be a space eater, but not necessarily a dynamic player. Anyway, I guess Jeremy, you
pick up the phone, Will.
You can weigh in, Jeremy. Is anybody there you think you're going to really miss out of the next few picks?
No, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some nice players here, but nothing that I can't pick up maybe 8 picks later. Okay. I think that's the other thing. Even if there are guys I like, I'd take the risk by picking up this extra pick and, probably getting the guy that I might want at the next pick.
That's right. I think in real life, the Steelers might try to move a player and get a 6th-round pick or something because it strikes me as almost unfathomable that they would allow themselves to go from pick 120 to pick 243 without any picks. That just seems like a bad business,
So we've got a logjam of interior offensive linemen, and some of them, obviously we don't like.
That's right. So I'm just saying, it's like Kevin Dotson is still young and he's a starter quality. It's like he may not be our favorite, but he's a guy that has trade value in this range, in the 6th-round range or whatever. So I think it's pretty realistic for us to take an extra pick because they might end up with one anyway. So Korey, you're in charge though. Yes, I'm hitting yes.
Yes. Let's see who the Titans fell in love with.
Andrew Voorhees, the guard from USC.
I mean, that would be a phenomenal pick for them. That's a great schematic fit. They need to really revamp that offensive line. So.
And here's who we lost out on. Miles Brooks, the corner from Louisiana Tech. Tyler Steen, a tackle from Alabama. Ricky Stromberg, powerful center from Arkansas. Zach Kuntz, the really receiving target, big receiving target for Old Dominion. Wanya Morris, the tackle who I think is actually sneaky good, especially, the worst case, he's a swing tackle for you that has value. Mo Diabate from Utah, who's probably his highlights look good, but he's not necessarily good on every play, inconsistent. And McClendon Curtis, the pick just before. That goes to show you just never know what might go. So we are now, Korey's the GM. Jeremy is talking offense. You want to start, bro?
Yeah, if we wanted to make our running back room a little more competitive, there's definitely some guys here that could do that. Sean Tucker's a good back that, kind of got injured in the draft process. Good player. I wanted to spend a pick on him here, though. Bryce Ford Wheaton's here, but we've talked about keeping it a little more realistic. I mean, there's some reports that, he could go as high as round 1 just because of his testing ability or whatever. But and realistically, I think he's gone here. Your guy is here, Parker Washington, kind of a bigger slot guy, great hands. Another receiver here, just to throw out, a guy the Steelers have had a visit with. They've talked to him a few times, a guy who I am very familiar with, Charlie Jones from Purdue. I know you said Parker Washington has the best hands in this draft, but if that's the case, Charlie Jones has the second. Both those guys catch everything thrown their way. They are pure football players. They are the type of slot receivers that I could see Pittsburgh really falling in love with because they're big guys. They're physical. They block. They a lot of different things they do. Jones comes from a more pass-happy offense, in Purdue, as where Washington came from a more running offense in Penn State. So both of them have plenty of upside there. Let's look at some offensive linemen real quick here, just to see if there is some value with some interior guys.
Unfortunately, they separate them by tackles, guards, and centers. So
Yeah.
Actually, here, let me just go to offense, and you can still.
There you go. John Gaines is a guy I like from UCLA. He's an athletic guy who can move. There's a lot of talk that Olusegun Oluwatimi from Michigan. Yeah, I'm giving myself a ding there. That was flawless pronunciation.
Pretty good. Bing. Another angel got its wings.
There's a lot of talk though that a lot of people think Oluwatimi is going to develop into a pretty good center in this league. So if we really wanted to add an interior player, if we really are that not content with the group of guys that we've brought in last year to compare to the guys we brought in this year, I think that's an option there.
I will say about Oluwatimi, we picked Kendrick Green at 87, and Oluwatimi is like 2 times the player Kendrick Green was. We can use revisionist bias, but Oluwatimi was a lot better than Kendrick Green was coming out, and this is 40-some odd picks later.
Yeah, it's not a projection. He's a dude that actually is doing it. He was very good at the Senior Bowl.
Yes. Yeah. Also a typical Steelers guy that they like, just one of those big school prospects who competes every day against a pro guy in practice, and they always seem partial to Michigan men. So,
yeah, I was reading
to our great chagrin, by the way. Go ahead, District Chairman.
I was reading an article just about him, and he seems like the player really before the year even started. Just team leader type of guy you can count on. True pro. So he's a guy I consider here. Tight end wise, Luke Shoemaker is almost a Gentry clone, in my opinion, except Shoemaker's probably a little bit better run blocker at this point in his career compared to Gentry. Will Mallory's a decent receiving one. Honestly, Jarrett Patterson is a name here that strikes a bell with me, because if we would have been talking about him coming out in last year's draft, he probably would have been a day 2 pick. So really just Notre Dame took a long time to kind of find their stride this year, but closed out the year better. So, I mean, that's another guy, interior offensive lineman who's played center, but can offer some versatility at center or guard. So I think I've kind of made, the case.
My side cut out, Jeremy. Who is that again?
Oh, Jarrett Patterson.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just missed it at the beginning. That's a guy who would be good value here. I'll say that.
What happened to Jarrett Patterson this year compared to last year? Because I'm not to say that I thought he had a bad year, but the draft buzz of him really went south.
He moved to guard.
Yeah, he didn't play center this year, and that hurt.
And he wasn't a bad guard.
Right, just not his true spot.
No, he's a center for sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, a lot of good guys there. Defensively, I just want to say quickly, my 3 favorite safeties in the draft, and I'm talking about not slot, move around players to play a lot of different spots, but like the guys who are like could step in at strong safety and be really good at that position. We drafted one of them with the last pick, and the other 2 are available at this pick. So it's like, in a way, if we miss JL Skinner, I want to mention it on the broadcast because we're not going to pick him here. AJ Finley, who's from Mississippi, and as Korey likes to keep saying, 21 years old. Is that younger than you, Korey?
No, but he's not by much, though.
There you go. That's our new measurement. Are they younger than Korey? And it's just a player. It's a mystery to me that why he doesn't have buzz. He's in the SEC. Starts there in Mississippi. He makes plays. He's got athleticism out the door. It's like, why is a guy like that just buried in this draft class that doesn't even have any good safeties in it, or many good safeties in it? And then the guy that is one of my draft crushes, Jason Taylor II from Oklahoma State, who is a guy that he had 6 interceptions this year, 7 press breakups, and 100 tackles.
Yeah, very athletic dude.
So it's like what like that guy's available at 120 or 127 or wherever we are now. That's incredible to me. But that being said, we kind of filled that spot. We got a corner earlier, but Caleb Hayes from BYU, this is about where I would start thinking about him. He's a guy that is like a 4-3 corner who we saw at NFLPA Bowl the Collegiate Bowl, who was just like super confident and smooth. And to borrow, I forget whose phrase it was, Korey. Was it something you said that he's the kind of player that when you're standing on the sideline, you can't hear his feet on the ground?
Yeah, I use that for Christian Gonzalez, but it applies to Hayes too. It's my high school coach went to Jalen Ramsey's pro day,
Oh yeah,
and he said you couldn't hear him stepping on the turf, like everything. He's getting out of breaks, and it's all just quiet.
yeah, exactly.
There's definitely some truth to that. For people that haven't been to a game recently, it's remarkable how loud feet are just running on turf. You wouldn't think it, but you hear some serious plotting sometimes, some serious click clack, click clack. So that's truly saying something there. If he's got that light of feet.
Yeah. And let's see. So edgewise guys, I mean, there's names on here that are very familiar to people, like Isaiah McGuire, Isaiah Land, Mike Morris from Michigan, KJ Henry, Brenton Cox. I think this is a little bit too early for the 2 or 3 edge guys that I still really like coming later. So I'm a little off that train. I will say that this would be a spot, for a Carl Brooks or Kobe Turner or Jalen Redmond. Let's talk about each one of them for a second. Kobe Turner, since we haven't mentioned him yet. Sorry, what am I doing wrong?
I think it's spelled with a K.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay. He's a player at Wake Forest who's a kind of a 3 tech, which for the Steelers' purposes, like I said, it's that piece, that interior thing that they're missing. Somebody sort of more dynamic on the interior. Now that if they're going to swap out a nose tackle, they're going to want to bring in a guy who is really a gap shooter, pass rusher. He's interesting to me. The aforementioned Carl Brooks. I've seen multiple games, 2 or 3 games where Carl Brooks basically just wrecks the offense. I think in the bowl game that they played this year, he was like, he just ran over offensive line or ran between them and just basically disrupted every play before it even had a chance to get going. Guys like that. Tape wise, if we're to believe that the athletic testing was sort of like a fluke because he was sick, tape wise, it's makes a pretty convincing argument. Jalen Redmond rather, from Oklahoma, I happen to like him as a guy that can play edge and play on the interior, and he is, his first step is very quick. Like if you watch, he's one of those cats that if you watch a lot games with him in it, he's just the first guy in motion. All of the linemen on both sides are kind of like have a second of reaction, and he's already like halfway through the step. His first step ran very well, tested very well, can play edge. He's just, I am, as you mentioned about Battle before, he's a guy that I maybe am higher on than most people are. And let's see. So that was a corner. I think it's too early for edge. And the other guy here would be, once again, maybe real life. This is where he goes. Maybe he would last, to the next pick or the next pick on this simulator. But Marte Mapu from Sacramento State. I mean, the thing about him is, if we hadn't drafted Nolan Smith and J.L. Skinner, he'd be at the top. I'd be banging the table for him here because he's a guy that can play both those positions in a way, differently than the other 2 guys, but does a lot of great things in that respect. At any rate, that's what it looks like. I feel like if you're going to go defense here, it's because of who else we picked earlier. It's probably going to be one of those interior pass rushers who can play the edge, move around a little bit, be weapons on defense.
So I think this has been the toughest pick so far. And I think part of it's because you could go so many different directions here, just where if you want to go BPA. But even ignoring that, I think between the 2 guys, one, there's receivers. There's receivers galore. Will just pulled it up. There's so many guys you could go with here. It's a glutton of receivers. However, I just made my mind, but this whole time you guys were talking, I was just stuck between Jared Patterson and Carl Brooks / Jalen Redmond. And I think I lean towards Carl Brooks on over Jalen Redmond, but it's tough because Jaret Patterson's a guy who's gonna, I think, outplay this draft slot,
Yeah.
and he's gonna be better than Mason Cole. However, the thing that's making me a little not iffy on Jaret Patterson, but just making me lean towards Carl Brooks now, is that there are a couple other centers actually that I think can really play that you could go later if that's your goal of replacing Mason Cole. Maybe they aren't ready this year, but I mean, Oluwatimi was I mean, there's just guys here that I feel like there's a lot better chance of one of those guys getting to this next pick that we have in the 170s now than a guy as dynamic as Carl Brooks on the inside. And even though on paper it kind of looks like we have interior D lineman now, you're an injury away from Ogunjobi from not really having a 5 tech that has played any meaningful reps because DeMarvin Leal only really got steam at the end, not meaningful reps, but a good number of reps. DeMarvin Leal only really picked up steam towards the end of last year. And, everyone talks about how much depth the Eagles have, especially on the O-line. Their D-line's even deeper. I mean, if you want to kind of copy what they did, roster construction-wise, you need as many guys on the O-line as you do on the D-line. So I'm going to go Carl Brooks. I like him a little more edge than Redmond and Turner. I think he's a bit more dynamic of a pass rusher than those two on the inside either. So I think I'm pretty comfortable going Brooks there, even if there's a chance we could have got him at 170, because that's just a guy I'd be more upset if he went than if, let's say, Patterson went.
Yeah, I think it starts to be when you hit these long gaps, it just feels like you make the pick based on who you're going to be the most sorry to have gone. I mean, feel like that. There's plenty of players I could pick, and I could even logically I can say, oh, probably Brooks and Redmond are both going to be available at the next pick. Like just take another guy if you really want one. But I think it starts to get to, who are you really your guys that you want to fight for? And I got no problem fighting for Carl Brooks. Like I said, the tape. He's a fun player. I mean, he's a wrecker, man. So whether that'll translate to the NFL, hard to say. But he wrecked offensive linemen at every offensive line position, which is not something you can say about everybody. Last thing, to me, the wild card here is DeMarvin Leal. What do they intend to do with him? Because if you're bringing Carl Brooks into a situation where he's basically going to play behind DeMarvin Leal, doing all the same stuff that DeMarvin Leal does, that's a little bit of like maybe it's a overkill. But it remains to be seen if he's going to really, they're going to play him mostly at edge or mostly at 5 tech, or what the future is for him.
Yeah, I mean, the other reason I really like Carl Brooks here, Korey, I think you did a good job with this one. You have to start thinking about Cameron Hayward not being back next year. And I think Brooks is more that guy than what a Redmond would have been, inside or whatever. So I think while there's a bit of a log jam this year, long term there won't be, because let's face it, Hayward, I think he did a little bit of a restructure this year just to help the Steelers out with some offseason room for cap space. But, he doesn't have 5 more years, in my opinion. He's got a 2 to 3 year window to really capitalize on what he has left. So even if we're, getting a guy like Carl Brooks to be his backup, spell him more often, make him more available late in games. Because, I mean, how many times, in the last 2 years have we looked over at Hayward and he is just heaving and puffing, trying to, make it through a game. So, I mean, kind of like Korey said, the one thing the Eagles have done, is they got deep on both sides of the line, having so many bodies that can do so many different things. I know it's a little redundant for this year, but, that means depth is really good this year. And hopefully, Brooks takes that next step, become a starter eventually. So,
yeah, I just don't think Jalen Redmond is going to play. He's going to be a, nickel pass rusher in the interior or 3 tech or an edge guy. He's not going to play that 5 tech role. He doesn't really have the size and butt and length for that. Whereas Carl Brooks is unique in that he could play, maybe not nose tackle probably, but he can definitely play the other spots, which is great. Good value. Okay, we're moving on. We got our extra pick here. Let's see what number it is again. 172 we're going to get out of this trade. Let's see the bonus player that we get to get. And if anybody of note comes through, you can feel free to mention them. Not too much. Demario Douglas, wide receiver from Liberty, kind of like him. Sean Tucker, running back. Nick Ham.
Tajay Spears at round 5. Woo.
Yeah.
Yeah, Watumi.
Bryce Ford Wheaton just goes. Luke Schoonamaker.
Parker Washington.
Baldonado from Pitt is an edge that I actually like. He's gone. Parker Washington.
Oh, Charles Jones just went.
Yeah. Yeah, but I got a Charles Jones type later in the draft that you're gonna like if we get that far, and still need a wide receiver. Chandler Zavala from North Carolina State, the offensive lineman.
That's a guy I could really see them taking in round 4 in real life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's definitely a guy.
Jared Patterson goes. Moro Ojomo gone. Dorian Williams, linebacker from Tulane, just in case you were interested. I think we're done trading. At least we don't want.
Yeah, we got to be a little realistic.
Yeah,
I was about to say we can't.
I think that's done. And that trade offer was terrible anyway. Pick one.
Could you go to
our bonus pick?
I'm offense, right?
Yeah, Korey is on offense.
You're Conlon.
I'm Kohlman.
And I'm defense.
Centers,
that's right.
Real quick, Will.
Yeah. What do you need?
I want to see if. No. I don't want to say names. I just want to see if someone's available. Centers.
What side of the ball you on? Offense?
Offense, yeah. No, I just go to centers.
Centers behind people.
Okay. All right. Defense goes first, don't they?
It can, sure.
I can, sure. Let's move over to defense so I can see who's actually here.
Korey thinks he's going to swoop in and give me the thing that I can't say no.
I want to get the recency bias too, so where I can come in late and that's what you're thinking of.
Recency bias, nice. Okay, got it. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, flip over to defense for me so I can see kind of who's still available defensively.
You got it, bro.
Make some cases for some of these guys.
By the way, just keep in mind that it's 80 picks before our next pick. So
okay.
I recommend looking far down the list. You got anybody that you think is not going to be available in the 7th round, now's the time.
Yeah. If we wanted to double dip here at corner, 2 names just kind of stand out to me. Garrett Williams from Syracuse. He's a guy that's kind of battled through some injuries recently, but he's a plus athlete. He can really run. He's another guy with nice size. And then Cameron Mitchell from Northwestern's a good player too. Not elite in anything, but just really good overall player. We've already kind of taken a safety, and I feel like we kind of have a log jam at safety now. And actually, so defensively, another guy that really screams potential is Terrell Smith from Minnesota. Very athletic defender in the secondary. He played some corner. I think there's some talk that he could play some safety or vice versa. I can't remember which one if I got that out of order, but just another really athletic piece to add to the back end this late in the draft. If we wanted to go another edge defender, a guy the Steelers have shown some interest in, Yaya Diaby from Louisville. Very good first step off the edge. Honestly, played a little more like 4-tech, even in Louisville's defense. He actually rushed a little more from the interior, but he's got a plus first step. Another guy, Yazir Abdullah, another very athletic linebacker here from Louisville, ironically enough. Both of these guys have some plus athleticism to them. Robert Beal is a guy who they've shown definite late round interest in, as a guy who kind of has not seen his full potential yet at Georgia, but, a little bit bigger guy than some of these other guys, 6'3", 250, tested pretty well, but just, at Georgia, if you're not the top dog, sometimes you just don't get to play as much. So, but another talented player in his all right. You wanted to go small school edge rusher here. Caleb Murphy's a fun guy out of Ferris State. Non-stop motor. Kind of reminds you a little bit of Alex Highsmith in that regard, just because of his non-stop motor. Excuse me. So those are some guys. I know Dylan Horton is a guy from TCU that's been catching a lot of ice. He tested better than people thought. Nick Herbig's a guy they've shown some interest in. Kind of a little bit of a lesser Nolan Smith. He's played edge, but might be a little bit more of an off-ball linebacker. But he's solidly well built. Kind of screams Steeler if you've ever watched him play for Wisconsin. Just very try hard, nonstop effort guy who gets to the quarterback off the edge. Does a good job in the run game. That doesn't really offer anything much as far as in the pass game, so to say. So there are some athletic edge types here. If you wanted to double dip at corner, I mentioned a few guys. That's kind of where I'd be, since we've already kind of taken a defensive tackle. We've already taken, as we project Nolan Smith to be more off-ball inside linebacker. We've got a log jam there now, and kind of the same at safety too. So I feel like if we're going defense, this is where we take the chance on another young edge rusher or double down at corner.
Okay, Korey.
So I think there's a couple different ways you could go with this pick. I'm going to assume that Payne Durham is still on the board at tight end.
Yes.
So yeah. I know Hunter Lipke is also available. I feel like this would be tremendous value for Lipke. However, I don't have faith in him being utilized correctly in this offense, especially after watching what they did with Connor Hayward last year. So as nice as that pick would be, I don't think I'm going to make that here. Payne Durham is a guy that we were kind of talking about earlier, where it's a guy who would complement Freiermuth really well, where he can be your inline tight end, really good blocker, steady hands. He didn't test well, but that's going to be a guy who's a pretty significant upgrade from Gentry, I think. But the real jewels available right now, I think, are on the O-line. One of them is a guy that me and Will are a fan of, City Sal.
Yeah.
My board isn't chalk, but also Antonio Mafi. I like Sal more than him, but Mafi would be a great pick too. My board isn't chalk, but Sal's my number 4 guard. He's just so consistent. He's got a great frame. He's just everything you want from a good guard. He's got it. He's really well built. But I think the guy that I'm leaning towards here is Alex Forsythe from Oregon. He is my number 2 center. I like him more than Patterson. In 761 snaps last year, no sacks, no hits, 1 quarterback pressure. He is a nasty, nasty run blocker. A big knock that people have on Forsythe is he tested like garbage, which is true. However, I want you to find me an example of one center being determined by their combine stats. We could look up Jason Kelsey's combine stats. They were not good. But Forsythe is a guy who, ever since the season ended, it's been a guy that no one's really talked about. The talk has gone down a lot on him. And we've got it up, Will. What's it looking like? 40 was good. I lied about that.
He was light. He was 280 pounds.
That's what it was. Yeah, 6'2", 280, and we weighed 280's rough.
Yeah. Scratch
him off the board.
Yeah, well, we would have seen how that would have gone.
But get this. This number is amazing. 414 shuttle.
Yeah, for a shuttle.
That's insane.
It is.
That's like, I would say that'd be like, I don't care if it's 260 pounds, a 414 shuttle is amazing. Yeah, so that's you can see there's something there. He's quick.
Back to Forsythe. It's tough between him and So. Is it Sow or So, Will? Do you know?
I'm sorry, say again?
Is it City Sow or City So?
I think it's So, but it could just be that it's really Sal, but they were afraid to say that for fear of offending him.
Yeah, so
because the size he is, I wouldn't want to offend him either, actually.
Right. I think the thing that's making me lean more towards Forsythe, because I think they're 2 pretty equal players, is that I would rather leave James Daniels where he's at. You want to screw with the O-line positioning as little as possible. If you have, I think we're moving Chuck's back to his more natural spot as it is. But the less you move, the better. That's been a thing that the Steelers have had an issue with for years and years and years now. So I think instead of moving Daniels to center and putting So at guard, I feel like I'd be more comfortable having Forsythe just plug straight into center. Maybe you want him to play behind Mason Cole. I think he's better than him right now. But at the very least, you actually have a very, very capable center backup. And I think he would take over at minimum by next year.
So just to play devil's advocate here, I think there's going to be a lot of shakeup on this offensive line anyway. So if there's ever a time to put everyone where you want to put them, I think this is the time because, you signed Isaac Samolo to start. We're moving Chucks back to left tackle. Where are we putting Samolo right now? I mean, right now, I think
he's a right guard, man. Guard. He's a right guard. And James Daniels, by the way, I was just about to make the argument that James Daniels, his regular position is center.
Right.
So it's like, you're following Chuck's back to his original position, but not James Daniels.
I'll argue this, though. He performed significantly worse at center than at guard with Chicago.
In the NFL, yeah, but that's also with Chicago.
But if he's if he played decent at guard, it's not like he was all bad. I will say something else if we really want to dig deep on this is that next year's guard class is bananas. Like, as rough as this guard class looks, next year's guard class is the best guard class it's got to be the best guard class in the
only
last,
here
10 years.
At SteelerFury.com do we not only not finish a mock War Room draft exercise for this year, we start talking about our
next year. Yeah,
exactly. Hey, you want me to start rattling off names?
So no, let's not go down that rabbit hole just
yet. Okay.
Corey's going to have his own show next week. He'll be appearing solo, but he will be talking about next year's guard class.
I will mention the top, or not the top, but out of 7 guards out of next year's class, they would be in the top 9 of this year's class if they came out all this year. Nice. So, another little thing to consider when thinking of positions here.
Okay, so the only thing that you haven't mentioned, though, is wide receiver. And I just thought to myself, who am I going to miss if they're gone by the time we get to pick 240-something? Is there anybody that you think will be gone at that point that we're really going to be sorry we couldn't? Because we are now starting to get down to that run on wide receivers we talked about happened.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So now it's thinned out considerably. Like in our minds, all three of us, can we all come up with some wide receiver names that we'd be pretty happy with that are still on the board and are still going to be there in the 7th round or not?
There's 5 guys for me here that I'd be fine with, and I know there's plenty more that aren't on this little, preview we get to see. Yeah, I'd be fine.
I agree with that. I actually really love the end of this class more almost than the middle. So
right.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, definitely some names here who I think will be there too.
Okay, so Corey, can you do one more thing for me?
Yeah.
It's a bonus pick. I feel like our holes are almost filled. I mean, I kind of feel like I would like to, I'm open to getting a tight end or a wide receiver that complements the room. I'm open to more offensive line because you can never go wrong doing that. But we'll have 2 picks left after this. I just wonder, is this a pick where you might take a developmental tackle that you think, if you have them in your program for a year or 2, might really pay off? Because this has been an MO. Like, if Philly's MO was that they had 3 guys that they actually developed into from not very good offensive linemen into, Pro Bowl or better left tackles. One of whom never played American football. Another was a tight end,
right.
Wide receiver turned tight end and went to the Army and came back. They selected him. He would have been the 4th, but he left and came to Pittsburgh. But they had a converted tight end, the aforementioned guy that hadn't played football, and then Lane Johnson, who was a great athlete but couldn't play at all in college. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if something on the table for the real life Steelers, if they had this extra pick, would be a guy like that. Is there anybody at this point?
I feel like you're almost setting me up to say Colby Sorsdahl, but I see him as more of a pro, like an NFL ready guy, even though he's from a small school, and I think he's a right tackle, which we have no need for now. But 2 guys that kind of pop up when you say that are in my head are Jake Witt from Northern Michigan, 6'7", 302 pounds, one of the best testers at tackle ever. His handwork is not pretty. Neither are his pass sets. However, he gets great latch on the guys. He's a good run blocker. He actually does hand fight pretty well, which is kind of like an instinctual thing. So it's really the technique. So really all that you have to work with him, which is encouraging. Another guy is John Ojukwu. He had a great all-star circuit. He's really one of those guys that I've seen stuff online, and I see kind of like the or the benchmarks that the Steelers look at. Is he gone?
Yeah, in this exercise, he's rated a little higher than probably most, Trevor. He is gone already, I believe.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, he went 156. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I didn't think you'd be gone. So,
that's
that really leaves you with Jake Witt, I think. None of these guys really Connor Galvin is not my cup of tea.
Not what I'm looking for. You know, like I want somebody who like it's a home run swing rather than I don't need a piece to plug in. I need somebody that's a home run swing. I mean, I feel like you sort of made the case now. Now I just have
Quentin Barrows too. Is another guy.
I'm all for a guy like Jake Witt. I just don't know if that's the right pick at this point. It feels like just have to I have to get over the fact that whoever we're adding at this point is going to be depth that you're hoping to develop into more than that. But that's a good position to be in at 172, right? So I'm not really going to complain about that too much.
One name I was going to throw out there, and I think he's listed under guard, who I think can play some tackle, is Mark Evans from Arkansas Pine Bluff.
I think Mark Evans is a center, in my opinion.
Okay,
but he's just so small.
But he's phenomenal. He's a phenomenal blocker.
If that's his true height,
I think it's less than that actually.
I didn't realize he was that small. I take that back then.
Even if he's that small, I think he could play guard. Probably best at center. But as much as I love him, I love Forsyth and Scruggs. I didn't even mention Scruggs. I love Forsyth a little more. I mean,
it just feels like we could probably get a good center, with one of our last picks.
Who would you propose, though? That's who I wonder, though.
I was just going to say, I think at this point, this is just our bonus last pick. Like,
right.
I can think of a lot of stuff that'll be great in round 7 that's going to be available to us. That's fun and that would be useful, and maybe even home run swing type guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I would say if I'm being the most practical right now, I think a center is the thing that of all the things that were discussed, that is probably the least cupboard is full. Yeah, we have Mason Cole, who's fine. You have James Daniels, who could play there, but maybe the thing to do is to have somebody really good play there. I mean, it's either that or tight end. Like here's the thing: if I were a little more jazzed about Payne Durham, I might be more inclined to do that deal. I like him, and I know that you're a table pounder for him, Korey. You really like him. I feel like he is a little bit more like a Pat Freiermuth in that he's pretty good at both things, but he isn't necessarily like a significantly lights out blocker or a significantly better receiver.
No, and that's also something to consider with a lot of this tight end class. There's actually some good receiving threats if we want to explore that later. But when it comes to blocking, it runs pretty dry after this.
Mm-hmm.
See, I disagree. I think there's a bunch of guys still left who are really good blocking tight ends. Maybe we'll get to that later. Okay, time to make a choice. For purposes of this exercise, having seen his film and been really impressed by it for a guy that doesn't get a lot of pub, I'm going to select Alex Forsyth, the center from Oregon, right?
Yeah,
I mean, 4 for 4 like Wendy's.
I mean, I like I could see. This was the hardest pick in a way that we've done so far because there are no glaring needs, and there was a lot of people that are kind of like,
might be minor upgrades, but they aren't. Yeah,
right. It's like a lot of guys would have been useful at this point, and I think whoever they pick at this point is going to be like, huh? Like I'm sure in real life when they pick at this point of the draft, like late round 5, round 6, it's always something long snapper or something weird. No offense. So anyway, we picked Alex Forsyth, Rajon Wright.
I will say I think
Puka Nacua, the wide receiver we didn't mention by the way, just went.
Yeah,
I think this year is going to be a year to see if because I'm not sure how often we've mentioned this on the podcast, but the Steelers have really expanded their scouting efforts from,
Yeah.
they used to never go to the Hula Bowl. They used to never go to CGS. They used to never go to Tropical. And I mean, I went to Hula Bowl and I talked to, shout out Emery Hunt. He used to post his videos on here. Will says that all the time. But Emery goes
we
to
were
all
the first, by the way, Steeler Fury was the first site that agreed to let Emery post his videos on our website. So but every time I see him, he reminds me of that fact. So
Emery goes to all those small events that you never even hear of, and he says the Steelers had not just one but multiple scouts at these events. And we talked to Corey Curtis. He said Casey Weidel, who's prominent area scout. I mean, he's talking to him from Gannon University. So this is where we see, are we just going to go chalk with some, maybe nothing against Robert Beal, but are we going to go for some guy who isn't really, he's just a Power 5 guy with some tools like we've done in the past, or are we actually going to dig deep and, maybe pull out some FCS guys or some D2 guys that might end up taking off later. So I think it'll just be interesting to see.
It will be an interesting, a view inside to see like who is really like how is this draft different from what Colbert has been doing for a long time. And I mean, I just feel like it's Colbert was a bit of an open book. He's kind of a conservative guy by nature, and he's a thoughtful, methodical and relatively conservative. And I think I would identify that it felt like when you got to this point of the draft, day 3, that you could almost see that their coordinators and or special teams coach got a pick. They basically we're going to throw you a special teams guy. Which one do you want? Or we're going to throw you you get the guy that you really like that's still on the board, as opposed to some kind of like plan to continue to swing for the fences. And then, teams like the Steelers, they're filling spots for camp. They don't even think the guy's necessarily going to be a great NFL player. But they're like, hey, we need some bodies at D-line. Let's throw him in there and see what he does, as opposed to, well, this guy is like from Nowheresville, but looks like he can really play. Like, let's find out. They don't do a lot. They weren't doing a lot of that before. Maybe
let's hope.
Optimistic that they will, because of all this scouts and things that have been around this year to different smaller events. I think that's great. Okay,
I'll say,
go ahead.
I'm defense, right?
Jeremy is Conlon. I'm offense, and your defense, Corey.
All right. You're first, or am I?
You're the one that said defense is first. I think you.
Yeah.
But
I did say that. Okay, could you go to defense? Because I just go to cornerbacks and safeties, because I want to see if there's a few guys that I've got on my stuff that if they went or not. Scroll down a little. Oh wow. Okay. I think I know my pitch. So this is the range where we were discussing slot earlier, and I'm going to say I think edge is addressed with an asterisk. I think edge is addressed in the sense that we have guys this year who can definitely play those backup spots, because I think Nolan Smith could drop down there. I think especially Carl Brooks could get meaningful reps out there. I think the Marvin Leal. It's a bit funky. You don't have that true number 3 guy, but I think that works just because you have guys to spell Nolan Smith. You have guys to spell Carl Brooks. You have guys to spell the Marvin Leal, even if it's kind of cannibalizing off each other. So I think D-tackle, I think we're good there too because of that Carl Brooks pick. Linebackers, maybe a little intriguing if you don't love Mark Robinson long term. I think as a number 4 developmental guy, as we have him here, I like his role in that. So I think really the only spot for defense to address is slot, but I think it's actually a pretty major spot to look at. So there's kind of 2 schools of thought where we could go for more of like a safety type who's more of a, kind of like a Kazir or Marlette, where they can't really cover how you might want them to cover. But, they'll play they'll play well for you in there. A guy that caught my eye as we scrolled down was guy that caught my eye.
That is not happening in real life. For those of you listening at home, AJ Finley is listed 309 on this board. I got a news for you, Pro Football Network. That's not happening.
No.
He might go in the top 100. Might go in the top 50. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead with what you were saying.
So, go back to corner and scroll down a little again. So, guys on my board that kind of stand out are Isaiah Bolden, who I think is still out here. I'm not sure if we got down enough for him. Ty Okada is a safety or slash slot. He played slot for Montana State. That's a guy who I think would fit well. But I think where I'm leaning more is more towards a coverage guy where they can play there. Jordan Jones from Rhode Island, another guy who I don't think I'm going to lean towards here, but is a phenomenal athlete. I think the guy that I'm really liking here is Mekhi Blackman from USC. He has extremely good film for a corner. He weighed 175, I believe, which is light, which is why he played well outside. He was 5'11" and change, but 175 is a bit light in the ass outside. That is going to leave you susceptible to some bigger blockers. However, his film is phenomenal. Very instinctive, plays with his frame, very aggressive tackler, one of those chop tacklers, so you don't really have to worry about him in run support. But he's just very, very twitchy. And those are the kind of guys that kind of scare me. So, whenever you'd see Terrell Edmonds out there covering on the slot, and it's Tyler Lockett, I remember, took him for a ride a few times. Guys like that, where those slots are shooing our safeties up alive. If you have a corner where you can match up with them out there, and I think a guy like Mekhi Blackman's good enough in run support where he doesn't have to come off the field unless, you're going against 13 personnel where he's coming off anyways. I think Mekhi Blackman's my stamp right here. I think this is a good spot for him. I think there's actually a realistic chance he's here in real life. But he's also – it's just really it's the instincts you want from a slot corner. The slot corners are always kind of like those junkyard dog types, and Mekhi Blackman kind of gave that impression on film.
Okay. Well, seems you got the pitch here.
I'd like to say I was showing with the Steelers who we picked so far in this draft, and maybe you can count along with me. Defense, offense, defense, and a center. Look, we got two offensive linemen. That's great. Never going to complain. But we picked four defensive players and two offensive linemen. And let me just remind you guys that our offense last year was somewhere between lame and boring. So I just feel like we have two picks left, right? So I'm doing my own math here. I'm like, a tight end, probably a blocking tight end, helps the run game. But it's like we got DeJuan Jones. That's like we're going to be able to run the football. I feel pretty good about that. As much as I would like to have more tight ends, I love tight ends. A receiving tight end, I could
shout out Noah Gindorf as you gloss over blocking.
Yeah, I was just going to say, well, the blocking tight ends that we're probably not going to get into right now. Noah Gindorf for sure from North Dakota State University is much like Washington in the first round or second round is a guy that's like an offensive lineman on the field, basically road paver. I actually really late in the process really got onto Lachlan Pitts. Is it? No, not Pitts.
William and Mary. Lachlan Pitts, William and Mary.
It is Pitts. Yep. Okay. Lachlan Pitts from William and Mary. He looks a little bit like our current number 2 tight end, but he is a much better blocker. He has that gene where they're just mean, like they really enjoy not just blocking guys, but like embarrassing them a little bit, which I don't know if that really works for you in the NFL. I feel like that you're just poking the bear a little bit. Like you're almost better off just like walling the guy off rather than taking his manhood away.
Try pile driving Von Miller to the ground.
This is what I'm saying.
See how that next play goes.
You might catch him once, but then he's going to earhole you on the next play or whatever. But
right.
He's a guy like Tanner Paula from Illinois State is another guy that's sort of a good two-way. If you're looking for somebody to be a complement tight end who can block and is a good receiver, as is Julian Hill from Campbell. We mentioned him the other night. Those guys are all actually, I think, would be nice additions, and they're probably all going to be undrafted free agents. So, those are good. The more pass receivers, Michael Ezeki from
Will Wallace from Tulane. You like as well. You haven't mentioned him.
Oh no, not from Tulane. You're talking. The one I like is for receiving.
You liked Will Wallace. You said he reminded you of Spaeth.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad thing. Sorry, as a blocker, you mean? Yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
So when you said earlier that you didn't think there were too many blocking tight ends left or they got dry, I was like, man, I think there's like a lot of guys that are going to be undrafted that are going to be good in that role. And I hope we get one or two, because we could really use that on this team. Pass receiving tight end, Michael Ezeki from UCLA. Not a bad blocker, but he's like a guy that's sort of, more got a little something in the receiving game. The guy I like that I picked in one of our other drafts is the guy from Georgia Tech.
EJ Jenkins.
Yeah. EJ Jenkins is a real interesting guy. He's kind of like that move tight end who's just a glorified big receiver, but got sort of impossible catch radius. And, I think it's like having Eric Ebron who has really good hands. You're not going to want to line him up in line and ask him to block defensive linemen. But if you're going to run the ball, you just split him out wide in the red zone. It's like if he's one-on-one on the edge while you're planning a run play inside, but you always have a check with me to that guy, he's going to be just fine. He's going to take a defender or two out of the play. That's going to be fine. If these remaining picks, these last two picks, I could see a tight end. I could see a wide receiver. I feel like once again, there's going to be a ton of wide receivers left. Like, do we just want to have our pick of the litter in the 7th round? Maybe we do. So let's go back to that board and have a look at who's left at wide receiver.
This is a tough spot for offense because, I feel like O-line's addressed. Again, developmental tackle is another spot you could go here. But, receiver, between receiver, tight end, and slot, it feels like we could still use another pick.
Yeah.
Josh Wiley's an interesting name here, actually.
Once again, these guys, the guys that you can see on this list here that are in the tight end class, for instance, Josh Wiley, Kamari Everett, even Ben Sims, Brenton Strange from Penn State, Braden Willis.
Blake Whitehart's a do-it-all guy.
Yeah,
but,
from Wake Forest. Like, here's the thing. They all offer something. And you I could imagine all of them working. They're not all going to get drafted. The one guy I wanted to mention, we were talking about receiving tight ends, is Griffin Hebert from Louisiana Tech. Another guy that, he's an immediate receiving weapon for you. He sort of solves, multiple problems because he can be your big slot wide receiver. He is actually a decent blocker for a receiving tight end. Like, from the standpoint of being a receiving tight end, I feel pretty good about him. But he's, he in the passing game, he plays like a wide receiver and still blocks. He's not strictly a guy that's, playing wide receiver. So anyway, those guys are interesting to me. The wide receivers, since I mentioned that, Matt Landers from Arkansas is a year overaged. If I remember that correctly, Jeremy, do you know?
I'm not sure about overage, but I'm very familiar with Landers. He's a guy that really turned some heads at the Senior Bowl. Moves a lot better than I think people thought he would. Ran pretty well.
Yeah, he ran into 4.3s and his length for days.
One thing I want to pose about the receivers here is I was just kind of thinking in my head. So if you're thinking not just this year but for the future, in terms of route runners, George Pickens is not a very polished route runner. It's not really. That's not a strength of his game. Allen Robinson's going to play a lot for us. That guy's also not really a dynamic route runner. He's just tough zone finder, and he catches a lot of balls. I think he doesn't have drops. And then what you're left with after that is Deontay Johnson, who might not be on the team in a year or two. And then you have Calvin Austin, who hasn't played a snap. So something that's standing out to me is it could be after this year, you don't have a single proven route runner. From the point of view right now, because for sure we could keep Deontay, and Calvin Austin could be a dynamic route runner and prove to stay healthy. But what I think we're kind of looking here, and it feels like there's always slots who can run routes, is maybe an outside guy who can snap off some routes, and maybe that could help narrow it down a little just in terms of what we need.
Right, that's what I was going to say, because I can, I'm high on Elijah Cooks from San Jose State, but he's like a bigger guy that I think is more suited to playing outside. He's not really going to be snapping off routes, as you said. The guy that I think, I look at, quote unquote, snapping off routes in the interior, Xavier Gibson and Dallas Daniels would be those two guys. Maybe Malik Knowles, maybe. He's he's not
even then. He's more of a crosser guy in my eyes.
That's right.
So.
That's right. So I think it's Xavier Gibson is an interesting choice from Stephen F. Austin. He's a high volume player, much like what Deontay Johnson is for the Steelers now. He's that guy at Stephen F. Austin, where, gets a lot of targets, makes a lot of plays, accumulates a lot of stats, and is a totally dependable target. If you throw to him on third down, or if you need a big play and you throw it down the field, he'll figure out a way to come down with it, kind of like him. Dallas Daniels. If you knew Montreal Washington last year, the guy that ended up with Denver, very similar kind of cat. He is a snappy route runner, primarily going to be successful in the NFL, I think, as a slot, but could play a little bit. He could do what DJ, does. I don't know if he could do it as well, but he could be a guy that plays. It's tough. It's tough it can beat man coverage on the outside because he's quick. Those might be guys I'd be interested in, but I would be remiss, since this is my last time talking about offense or being the GM, and I can only really talk about defense next time. I think the pick's a no-brainer. I think the pick is Corey Curtis, a quarterback from Gannon. And the reason I think it is because what the Steelers have at quarterback right now is a starter who's young and a question mark. You have a backup that no one likes, who's basically good enough to be a backup, but I think if they got a chance to unload him for a bag of footballs, they probably would, because they don't really need to pay somebody that much money to be a crappy backup, and they don't even really have a third guy. So bring in a guy who is got some upside and could be your number 3 immediately and has a possibility of being better. Like, it's a lottery pick for more than that, but it's in the 7th round. I mean, it feels crazy not to at least consider that.
Mm-hmm.
He's, for those of you who haven't, seen our obsessed Corey Curtis shows that we've talked about him like 3 times now, but in a nutshell, he's big. He's built almost like Big Ben in terms of his size. Although he's playing at a small school now, he played for a season and a half at Ohio State and played against one of the best defenses in the history of college football for a year and a half as the scout team quarterback in live action every practice. And his knowledge of the game and processing is way advanced compared to what it might be for not only for a Division II player, but for a lot of Division I players. He's more like a guy that I think has a pro future, and it's all about him getting a shot. He gets into camp, gets an arm, in as a camp arm. I think he's a guy that could make your team. And we're in the 7th round. This is the time. That's it. That's my soapbox.
All right. We have all made a lot of pitches here for players, so there's a lot to consider.
It's the 7th round, man. Go with
I think we're pretty narrowed in. It's receivers, Mekhi Blackman and Curtis.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm going to take Xavier Gibson here, and I think it's because the Steelers said they wanted to get a guy who can come play the slot this year. Yeah, they traded for Allen Robinson, but he's not he's a big slot. I think we need a guy who can come in and be, that quick slot player. And I think Calvin Austin can do that. But in the event he can't, Gibson has some insane upside. He runs really great routes. He's super fast. He's very twitchy. He's a guy that, sitting here this late, he could end up being a home run pick here, in a few years. Like you guys said, this is where we take those chances. Mm-hmm. I like Gibson here. It gives the offense another pass catcher, and to add to our receiver group, which is, not exactly the most explosive, as Will told us, from our offense this past year. So I think giving Kenny Pickett, an offensive weapon here is the way to go.
I think one thing to factor with this too, think of where, because let's say we're even thinking the Deontay replacement. Think of where Deontay plays probably 70% of his snaps now, and it's on the outside. So let's say you hit the lottery ticket that feels like Calvin Austin. If Calvin Austin hits and he can play in the slot, you're going to have 2 dynamic guys on the field, route running wise, rack rise, and then Pickens is going to be a nightmare out there on the edge.
I'll tell you this, though, guys. You're going to think I'm crazy, but I think Calvin Austin is a better receiver at the position that Deontay Johnson is playing than he is in the slot. He is like Tank Dell. that cover guy. I mean, the corners on the outside, especially bigger corners, no shot covering that guy out of the break. Like, cannot get their hands on him. And so I feel like, this is a nice Gibson is a nice added piece to that. He's like another guy you can move around, who can play some on the outside, who can play some in the slot. If Austin, doesn't have like a career-ending injury from last year, he can do some different things for you. And even Dante Johnson, maybe I'm a bigger fan of him than most Steelers fans are, but I think he does a lot of stuff for you. He is able to get open even in situations where they got a really good man cover guy against him. He still gets open, and his drop rate is lower than most of the really good receivers in the league. So I'm not so down on him. So I feel like adding any kind of a good receiver to the mix, and adding Robinson, all of this stuff helps. You still have a horrible offensive coordinator and a head coach that wants to play attrition football. But that being said, we've done some good stuff for them.
If only every other defense would put their linebackers and safeties on our slot receivers like we do for them.
Well, now if these linebackers that we have are going to be a little bit better playing those receivers in the slot, because the teams in the league, the defenses that have really good linebackers, erased slot receivers, like the big slots playing against San Francisco. Yeah, forget it. Like Fred Warner is covering that guy if he runs a deep post. We don't care, So it'd be nice to have some guys that have that kind of skill. And a guy like Nolan Smith is running with anybody down the field.
I think something about Nolan Smith playing out there in the slot, like we might ask him to, is you might not think he would be that great at it just because he's been playing on the edge, but his short area quickness is he's just so twitchy. He's like a ball of energy that. Maybe you don't want to ask him to cover deep posts like you do for Fred Warner. He probably has the speed to, but maybe not the range as Fred Warner does, like lengthwise. But all these short routes for slots, he can probably stick with a lot of them.
Yep, I completely agree. And I love, Jeremy, what you said about Gibson. I feel like it's a good description of his game, and I think it's a good fit. And, considering the value of getting him here versus like a Parker Washington or somebody earlier, I feel like that was a good choice. Darius Davis was a guy from TCU, maybe fits that as well a little bit, but he just went. Kamari Everett went as well in terms of our tight ends, although, he's a bit more these days of an inline blocking tight end than he started off his career as a crazy, offensive weapon in the pass game, but now he's sort of come down. He's gone. And then another receiver we didn't talk about, probably could have, Jadakius Bonds from Hampton went the pick before us. 251, kids, the final pick. We finally made it for those of you who've been following along. We're down to our last pick. All right, so for this one, because we got the bonus pick, Korey is the GM, Jeremy offense, and I'm defense. I guess that means I get to go first, right?
Yep.
There are any number of really good edge rushers that are probably going to be available to us as undrafted free agents, but that we could snag one just to make sure we get him and he doesn't go someplace else. The guys who I really like, me personally, I like a guy who's a complement to TJ Watt in that you want to have a guy that basically can hold the point in the run game so that TJ can chase from the other direction. Like that's more or less the way that the Steelers align their edges and what they ask them to do. So I think of that, even if it isn't technically the strong side, I think of, Lamar Woodley or James Harrison, somebody that's a bit more sturdy on that side. And the guys that come to mind that are still sitting here, like let's just open it up again and look at the edge, are some names that we haven't really discussed and maybe not on there.
Darrell.
Yeah, well, Darrell Johnson is funny. He's like in a way, I almost think he could be an off-ball guy who's a stunt runner, like what do they call that guy? Like the elephant player or whatever. Might suit him. Didn't test all that great. David Perales from Fresno State is a guy that like Darrell Johnson. They're both a year older, played an extra year in college, like 5 years. But at this stage, like guys like that both work. Perales is he seemed to really come alive this year in terms of just putting the tools together with the athleticism. He's a really great athlete, as is Darrell Johnson from Liberty, production is off the charts. Really good player. Came from nobody wanted him, and he went to junior college in New York, which is not a place you really want to go to junior college if you want to be seen. And somehow he went to the same school as Javion Ensley and Jeremy Webb and some of the other guys that have sort of come around and draft talked lately. And then the other guy is Jordan Ferguson from Middle Tennessee State. Also an interesting guy that can do a lot of stuff. And if nothing else, he's going to be a great special teamer. And the last one would be Nelson Jordan, the second, the edge rusher from Bowie State, who had 5 sacks in the Legacy Bowl. And maybe the Legacy Bowl offensive line wasn't the best, but still, he looked like a young James Harrison out there, kind of dipping under guys and dipping and ripping. I could see any of those guys being a possible choice. And if we want to add corners, the guy that I've pounded the table before is Christian Braswell from Rutgers, who is in my opinion, one of the great slot guys in college football. Their defense, much like Illinois, you could draft anybody in the defensive secondary to play any position. I feel like they would be successful. Really like him. And speaking of Rutgers and the other guys, Avery Young was another guy that can play all around the secondary. So if you're looking to add a little bit, more defense to someplace that would be helpful, I think that would be it. But, you'll have to decide when Korey slams the door with whoever he's going to pick at the end. Jeremy, you'll have to win him over.
Well, we've kind of already, last pick, we took a wide receiver that can kind of do everything for you. So I feel like, offensively, we could go interior offensive line, but we already took a center. So it's like the log jam is officially there now because we've got quite a few guys who can play interior. But look at that developmental offensive tackle like we talked about, But, I think Jake Witt is still on the board, but I just don't think he's going to be available realistically this late. Someone's going to take, a pick on him. For him to be in the last 10 picks of this draft, I don't think he'll last that long. I think someone will take, end up taking him sooner. I hate to say it, but I think the guy that if you really want to make sure he's a Pittsburgh Steeler at the end of the day and doesn't take the chance to sign elsewhere, let's take your guys' guy, Corey Curtis, the quarterback from Gannon. Like, why not? Like you guys said, Pickett's still trying to figure it out. I feel like he's got a future as a starter. Behind him, though, is yuck. Trubisky's the washed-up guy who's never lived up to the draft billing. Behind him, I'm not even sure who we have behind Mitchell Trubisky.
No one.
I think we have nothing.
Nobody.
Yeah, we don't even have a futures guy signed or anything.
Yeah, I mean, so like you guys said, when you're interview with him, you would just kind of looking here. Pittsburgh's always been a team that's had 3 quarterbacks. Maybe that's different with Kahn and Weidl running the show, but if there's ever a need for a camp arm at minimum, this is your pick. He's a guy who can really throw the ball around. Walked on at Ohio State and ran that practice squad, that scout team look. I would be remiss if we kind of pass on a quarterback late that we like here. Because I feel like there's, offensively, I feel like there's tight ends after this in the undrafted free agency that always seem to carve out roles in the NFL. I feel like we can do that.
Same with edge guys,
same with edge guys
and slot guys too. There's always slot guys who don't go, and
right. There's a plethora of those type of guys around. There's not always, those quarterback prospects this late that teams, like you guys said, 4 teams went to his pro day. There's something there that people like, that we've seen it, in the clips and the interview. But I'd be remiss if we pass on a chance to maybe pass on a quarterback that could actually develop, now
here's
with
the
a
thing.
new front office and stuff.
He's 24 going on 25.
Yeah, he is older.
In a way, I would argue that the fact that teams are interested in him, despite the fact that he's 24 going on 25 and at a D2 school, tells you that there's something there, right? some teams are not into, don't really care if a guy has a big arm and is big. They would rather have a little guy that runs and all that stuff. But the teams that are into that their metrics for quarterback to fit a certain dynamic of like, you need to be able to make this throw, the out route and these intermediate routes in tight windows, and they need to, be able to get the ball through the wind and bad weather, and they need to have some size to them. If that's your parameters, and you're willing to overlook the fact that he's basically done his developing and is more developed in some ways. He's as developed as a 24-year-old quarterback in the NFL would be. It's like he played in a nearly professional system in college and then learned two systems after that. I just feel like that's the Steelers are better than 50-50 to take a quarterback in this draft anyway, because they didn't even sign anybody to be their third.
Right.
So
obviously,
yeah, I feel like the need is there, and he's a guy that, if it happens to work, I mean, if the worst case is that he's a great backup for a couple of years, you scored big in the 7th round.
Right. Mm-hmm. 7th round.
me and Will have, we've talked about how, we'd rather draft him because he's a guy who seems to really care about what system he's going to play in. So maybe we can force him to come here if we take him with the 7th and not have to try and pull him away from the Chiefs or the Dolphins or any of these teams with way more fun offenses than ours. He gave us the political answer that he'd be fine quarterbacking in a running offense, which I'm sure is true. But I'm sure down deep, I was about to say I wasn't sure if he is going to be.
I don't think he is. It's okay. We're gonna plug in a name that's not him later. I'll type it in on the screen.
Right.
But yeah, so I mean, as much as like a Christian Braswell would be cool here and all that, there's gonna be guys at these other positions. Corey Curtis is, it's a weird mix where you get a guy who, with his fundamentals, he's actually quite polished and ready for the game. Like, it's not like he has big flaws technically he needs to fix, but he's also got upside where, that's a guy who starts seeing the game really well. He's going to like carve up some teams with his arm. So, I mean, he works as like a developmental number 2 for next year, work his way as a 3 this year. He's fine grinding his way up. So this is a guy where it'd be better to lock him up for, pick 251 than potentially losing him to a team with a more explosive offense and free agency.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I will say is he might go sooner than this. He
very well could.
If teams are on to him and they think he's going to be a priority free agent that they don't want to, it just starts driving the price up a little bit. And once you get to that middle of day 4 or day 3, I think that a lot of teams look at those picks as like the same as UDF. They're just like, these are our priority free agents that we want to make sure to get.
Right.
So it's possible he doesn't make it to this point, but if he does,
and I'll say, like, Cole was a somewhat similar prospect to him, where he is Cole Kelly. If you guys have been listening to Will, I'm sure you've heard about him. But older guy from a smaller school, and he had a ton of interest from the Commanders, and then after that, he had some small interest from the Bills, a little bit of interest from the Steelers, but he was able to make it through the 7th, and the Commanders were ready to take him in the 6th, but because these other teams weren't that into him, they weren't able to land, or they were able to land him anyways. With Curtis, it sounds like there's a market, like there's more of a market than previous guys of his kind of archetype.
Well, it's like the processing part, like the knowledge part of it, and interviewing him. Like I have interviewed both guys, right? And I don't like Cole. I thought he was a really good player. And there's nothing bad about interviewing him, but there's a big difference in talking to the two of them in terms of the sense that you get about what kind of a football IQ they have, and about what kind of, just the feel for them as a person coming into your locker room. Like, I think, but I would love to have either guy as our number 3 quarterback. Don't get me wrong, but I think Corey Curtis is sort of a cut above. And sorry, Cole, if you listen to this, it's not because I don't like you, because I was your biggest fan. I still am, and I can't believe that you're not starting for the Showboats, especially with a nickname like Steamboat. How can you not be starting for a team that's called Showboats? Marketing opportunities are crazy. George Costanza only ran the team. But
Right.
I think Corey Curtis is I don't know. There's something special about him. I just hope that somebody can give him a chance before he's overaged. Before he ages out. Because if they
That's definitely a thing.
Yeah, because if they do give him a shot before he ages out, I feel pretty good about what he could do in the NFL.
All right. Well, just to recap here, let's go from top.
Can you see my?
Can I give a shout? Can I give a shout out to one player that we didn't really mention towards the back, but Art Green from Houston.
Oh yeah,
I almost did. One of these last few players. I was at the Hula Bowl, and I will say firsthand there was plenty of Steelers attention for him.
Now, Art Green in what position?
He played corner at Houston. He played safety at the All-Star game and corner. He's probably a guy who can realistically play both.
Okay.
Think of probably like a Trey Norwood replacement, where that kind of role is what he would be. But Ike loved him. Ike was talking to him for probably 30 minutes, if I had to say.
Okay.
Yeah, the thing is, he played safety at one All-Star game and then played corner at the other. And in the one-on-ones playing corner, he absolutely blanketed guys, the quick guys that other big corners with length couldn't cover. So really was very, very impressive. It was just that we had already done, safety corner and, like into the mix.
He's not really a slot, so.
No. I think he's an outside. I mean, me personally, I think he's an outside corner.
I think so too.
And 4-3-1 or 4-3-2 or something, and it's like he's got length for days. And there's a lot of guys, at the bottom of this draft as corners that are like that archetype. You mentioned Isaiah Bolden from
Corey Trice.
Same thing, Corey Trice. There's a bunch of guys. If you want a big corner with length who can cover, there's guys. It's more difficult to find guys that are versatile, maybe. So, and anyway.
Well, that's a wrap, gentlemen. Let's kind of recap here very quickly. Just kind of go through our picks. Pick 17.
I was trying to get my screen in there. Here's us, but I was trying to share the right screen, the one that has the. Here we go. Boom.
Yeah. So
it's graphic design work for you guys.
Pick 17, we took Nolan Smith, the edge from Georgia, who we kind of project more as our off-ball linebacker. At 32, massive tackle, DeJuan Jones from Ohio State fell to us. At 49, we took cornerback Julius Brents from Kansas State. At pick 80, we took J.L. Skinner, the safety from Boise State, who's been a little banged up in the pre-draft process. Hoping we get a steal there. We traded down from our fourth-round pick to pick up an extra pick at 172, but at 128, we took Carl Brooks, defensive lineman from Bowling Green. With that extra pick at 172, we took center Alex Forsyth from Oregon. Pick 241, our newly acquired pick 241 from the Rams. We took Xavier Gibson, the wide receiver from Stephen F. Austin, and last but not least, we took one of our own favorites, Korey Curtis, the quarterback from Gannon University. So I feel like we did a pretty good job here, gents. I feel like we definitely got some guys who are going to start right away, some guys that are definitely going to play immediately into, big-time depth roles, guys who are definitely going to play a lot of snaps. So that's it. The end of the Mock War Room pre-draft extravaganza, episode 5 of 5.
Hey man, I can tell you I've been doing this on this show since 2009. You never know how it's going to turn out 3 years from now, but this feels like one of our better efforts. I don't know if it's because the rankings on guys were generous to us or just happened to fall our way, but it feels like the Steelers are, for a change, in a good spot draft for
it must be those young guys in the room now.
Oh, I guess maybe it could be. We got rid of those yokels. I want to tell them you said that too.
I will mention, even if Julius Brents might be like the biggest steal, if I had to say one guy at 49, there are a lot of corners I would be fine with at 49 that we didn't really mention. So just spitball guys like Tyreek Stevenson is a guy that they've showed a lot of interest to. If we took him at 49, he might not be the player we think Brents will be. That'd be a great pick at 49, even if the board doesn't fall as graciously as it did here.
Yeah, down with it. Well, you guys did a great job I regret my pick a little bit at 172. I love Alex Forsythe, but now I'm like looking at that list of players. I'm like, oh, should have gotten that receiving tight end. But
that's why we wanted all those extra picks.
I know we always have more picks, but that's what undrafted free agents are for. So join us on the next episode where we go through the undrafted free. No, I'm just kidding. We don't.
No, my God,
we're not doing any more of this. But do by all means join us. After the Steelers make a selection in the draft, we'll do a little review of, maybe I'll let Jeremy do a solo show and he can review the Steelers picks in round 1. And
hopefully, there's not too much despair.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
what do you guys? I'll just ask you this for the last bit. Who do you think the pick will be if you had to guess right now?
I mean, if Joey Porter Jr. is there, it might be a record timing for not wasting any time to turn in a draft card. Just saying.
I'll give, because I think that is the case if he's there.
Yeah.
I'm going to act like the Commanders.
We know him well, obviously.
I'm going to act like the Commanders took him at 16. I'm going to say Darnell Wright, and oh boy, would I be happy if we took Darnell Wright at 17.
Yeah, I would too.
The thing is that feels different about this year, I think, is that between the pre-draft visits and who we've shown interest to, I'm not really fearing our picks as much as I normally am.
Well, I'll ruin your day. I think there's less than a greater than 0% chance that they trade up for Jalen Carter.
I wouldn't care.
Yeah, not to say that. Well, it's not picking him. We're all good with that. We love the player, but what do you have to give up to do that? Like, it's going to be awfully hard to lose pick 32 in this draft that you have to use to move up, or a first next year when they might be looking for a quarterback if things don't work out. You know what I mean? So it's
we already got Korey Curtis. So
that's true. That's true. We solved that problem. All right, gents. On behalf of everyone at Steeler Fury, I'm Wil Masisak, Korey Karbowsky, and Jeremy Kohlman. Take us out, man. It's your show.
All right. And if for some reason you don't feel like turning on ESPN or the NFL Draft Network, me and some other guys on a different podcast are doing a live draft reaction show. So if you don't want to hear Mel Kiper or Todd McShay or all the usual bunch, we are doing a live draft reaction show. Obviously, we will not be able to do any screen sharing because we don't want to get sued. But if you want to get someone else's opinion on picks as they're happening live, feel free to turn into the Extra Point. I will put a link on the Steeler Fury page if you guys want to turn into that. But that's something we've done for the last 2 years with that podcast. It's been a lot of fun. A lot of ranting, especially after last year when we took Pickett. Lots of good back and forth jarbs on that too, just like you hear on this podcast. So,
well, if somebody picks Korey Curtis, you'll have to have Korey on the show and as a guest commentator.
Well, we only do round 1, so if he gets selected in round 1,
it'll be a real story.
Talked about news story for the next year. So, with that being said, thank you, gentlemen, for participating in our mock draft war room here. Steeler fans, SteelerFury.com fans, thank you for joining us. Hopefully next week we are pretty happy with our pick in round 1.
So, all right, go get them, Steelers, guys. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And if you made it to the end, God bless you.
Yeah, here we go.
Steeler Fury.
That felt like a
SteelerFury.com.